Your story, like so many others, deserves to be told. Over the years, you've paired your strong vision with an unwavering work ethic. You've asked the most of yourself and brought so much to this community. And as Columbus has become a part of your story, you've become a part of our story. At the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, we see you, the hours you put in every day, the insights you gain at every turn. You've established not only who you are, but also what's next for you, and we're here to help you get there. We help to elevate businesses, support people, expand portfolios, and bring ideas to fruition. We are your champions, knowing that when we all have a seat at the table, our city is stronger for everyone. We empower small business owners, job seekers, and colleagues to seize every opportunity. We're making Columbus a smarter and more open city for all, because you make us better. With every step you take, you elevate our collective understanding and shape where we're headed as a community. And as you're defining everything you'll become, you're making Columbus an example of everything a city can be, because our diversity makes us stronger. The City of Columbus, Office of Diversity and Inclusion. Defined by you, made for us.
I hope everyone's doing fantastic today. Welcome back to Govern. So excited to see you. Thrilled that you're here. I'm going to open my little chat box to the side, see some good mornings starting to roll in. It's always good, always good on a virtual conference to see that people are alive and at the computer, typing in good morning, good morning, good morning from this department, good morning from this part of the state or region or city. So feel free to throw your good mornings in there. Again, my name is Daniel Jude. I've been working with the City of Columbus Office of Diversity and Inclusion to plan this 3-day conference as we think about how we create public and private sectors, how we curate cultures within those spaces to be more inclusive, more innovative, and more impactful. And we're talking about the second piece of that today. We're talking about how to become more innovative. And we've got just a fantastic group of leaders, really effective and thoughtful, reflective leaders to talk about the process of innovation and what that is and perhaps what it isn't, maybe more importantly. So we'll try to pull back some of the myth narrative about what it is or what it isn't as we explore it. So what I'd like you to do, I'm seeing a bunch of good mornings rolling in. That gives me confidence that enough people are at their computers that I can ask a question and get some response. So I want to start our morning with a little bit of interaction. I know that not everybody is ready to go. You hit join meeting and host lets you in and you click mute and you stop your video and say, good, I need to finish my coffee and do my stuff. And I get it. I get it. So I don't expect all all the attendees to jump right on this question, but for those of you that are ready to go this morning, I'm curious, and you can put this in the chat box just to everyone. What's one thing from yesterday's time together, either session? What's one thing that really made you think? One thing you learned, one thing that made you think, something that someone said that you thought was particularly insightful. I'd love to see a rolling list down the chat box over here of some insights pulled from yesterday as we start. Ooh, Jedi. Okay. As we start our time today, just to kind of see, to contextualize a little bit our time together. What are people thinking about? What they learn? Grace, Jedi. Self-reflective on when I've used microaggressions, call me in versus call me out, focus on behavior, not changing the heart. Yep, a couple of those. The value of data. So good. Metrics, erasing and reducing institutional. This is good. Keep those rolling. I'd encourage you as participants, and I'm going to do the same once I get a little break from talking here, scroll up and down that chat box and see what people are saying and what they're learning. And we're going to do that a couple of times over today, and I'll give you some clarity on what that will look like. First thing I want to do is I don't know if any of them are on right now because I haven't scanned the participant list closely yet this morning, but I just want to thank everyone that was involved yesterday from a speaking and presenting perspective. I feel so honored to have been a part of those conversations in some small way and gotten to convene those voices. Just fantastic conversation. Dr. Jana brought so much energy and clearly just such a deep well of wisdom and knowledge and experience into the conversation to start our conference. And then, with our mayors and chief of staff Crosby, just had such a fantastic, open, transparent, on the ground human conversation, which, let's be honest, doesn't happen that often when we involve political figures in work that we're trying to do. It's really hard to break through some of the barriers or the hedges or just some of the protective measures around politics. It is what it is. And it's just so honored to have them show up so honest and vulnerable and raw with us yesterday. So thank you to them. And if any of them are on the call, thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, I'm still seeing some great stuff coming out. Evolution of D&I litigation to bottom up to George Floyd. Focus on changing behavior. Yep. Stay interviews instead of exit interviews. These are so good. Oh man, I'm going to scroll through these. We could plan a whole conference just on your reflections on this. I also want to thank just the ODI team. Again, the Office of Diversity and Inclusion team with the City of Columbus. Thank you for all the resources and the time and the energy that you've put into this conference and convening this space for us. I want to thank our speakers for today and our sponsors, those companies and people that, again, have showed up to make what we're trying to do here possible. Of course, the City of Columbus, Franklin County, the City of Dayton, and the City of Toledo as sponsors taking care of the logistics around this event. And then all our speakers for the day that we'll introduce as we roll them out. I also want to thank you again for showing up. We've got a huge number of you who signed on for day 2. That's a real honor. I don't take it lightly when there's a multi-day experience. There are so many demands on our time, and to see you coming back is just a real honor and a real treat for me, and I know for the Office of Diversity and Inclusion team. As a reminder, as we get started, just some technology reminders. Again, you've got a closed captioning option at the bottom of your screen in the toolbar there that you can turn closed captioning on. I think probably technology-wise, there's a 2-ish second delay on that. So for some of you, that's distracting and you can turn it off. For some of you, that is really helpful to keep up with the conversation and you can turn that on. So please use that as it supports you. The other thing I want to mention for those of you that are less familiar with Zoom, if you look at the Zoom window on your screen, you've probably got some little boxes across the top of your screen, little videos. If you go to the top right corner, you'll see a little grid. And if you hover your mouse over it, you can either choose grid view or speaker view. What I'll try to do, and what I did yesterday across the day, if you keep that on speaker view versus grid view, you'll see during the keynote and the panel, you'll see a full screen version of whoever's talking. And that can be a much easier way to follow the conversation. Some people prefer grid so they can see everyone at the same time, but just know that you have a couple of options there in terms of how you're consuming content across the day and how you're experiencing those speakers. And that's your place to go, grid view versus speaker view. So please avail yourself of that. Again, we've got some awesome stuff. Still happening in the chat box. Don't expect what you don't inspect. What a line. That was so good. I love stuff that rhymes, and, I love alliteration and all that kind of stuff. If you don't measure it, you don't mean it. So good. So in the chat box, remember, you've got options to click. Everyone can see it, or you can send privately. As we get started with our keynote conversation with Paul Reeder, who I'll bring into the conversation in just a moment here, and as we go across our panel, we really do want to carve out as much time as we can for participant questions to come into the conversation. So I'll be moderating the conversation between our innovation experts today, and I'll be watching that chat box, and I'll have Jordan Kaiser watching that chat box as well. So you can put your question into the public chat box or send it privately to Jordan Kaiser. You can just scroll through that list to find her, and she'll text me your question if you don't want to put it up publicly. And I'll try to engage those questions in the course of the conversation and reserve a chunk of time at the end of that panel conversation specifically for that purpose. So please feel free to do that. Also, one of the cool things that happened yesterday was just a running conversation in the chat box about what was happening. So please feel free to do that again. A quick recap from yesterday, a couple things that I learned just to participate with you in the chat box as you're talking about it from the mayors, thinking about how we maximize citizen engagement in some of these policies and initiatives. Not only team members whose voices on these teams are critical to the success of these teams, but also asking real questions about stakeholders, like who are we serving, and are we hearing their voices? And if we're not, how do we do that? And what are the vehicles by which we can really hear the people that we need to hear and get them what they need? Things like policy and metrics, moving from problem to solution. Dr. Jana, a couple of things I'm thinking about from her opening was her 1, 2, 3, which I thought was so powerful. Step one in creating change is finding your coalition, doing coalition building. Who's my team, right? Who's going to support me if somebody tries to throw me under the bus or silence my voice or paint me into a corner in some kind of way? Who's on my team? So building that coalition. Number two, understanding and accepting our role or our relationship with the power structures. How do they serve us? How are we benefiting from them? How do we contribute to them? And how does that complicate our relationship as we start to unwrap and unfold them? And just being really honest about that. And then number three, leading with data. What are we really talking about here? I love all the relationship stuff. I love the human to human stuff. That's a lot of the focus of my individual work. But at the end of the day, companies and top level leaders make decisions based on data and metrics. And without providing those, we're not giving the kind of guide rails we need to be giving or offering for those folks to make as strategic as decisions as they can or as possible. So I want to invite you in today to step one of Dr. Jana's process, which is coalition building. You're going to have a fantastic opportunity today to do that. This conference overall is a great opportunity to build a coalition because the folks who are logging on for this conference are folks who are serious about creating change. And so you can see names in the participant list and engage with those folks. And after the panel today, rather than just being done at the Q&A, we're going to go into a breakout session where we will break you out into rooms of 8 or 10 people, and you'll have an opportunity to put some flesh on the bones of this conversation for you and figure out what it means for you in your space, in your role, within your sphere of influence. Ask questions, share insights, and ultimately connect with folks who want to do the same kind of work in their role, whether it's a different department in the same city or someone sitting at a different desk in a different city across the state from you. Fantastic opportunity to jump right into Dr. Jana's first step of creating change in our space. So I want to get started. The other thing that Dr. Jana said that a lot of you have said on the chat was Jedi. Jedi was something that stuck out to you. And so I don't want to let that one go. So I want to ask you a question. I'm gonna launch a poll here, and you can just respond. Based on yesterday's conversation with Dr. Jana, do you want to become a Jedi Master? We'll see the results for those of you that want to participate. We'll see those live popping up. Who wants to be a Jedi Master? Yes. Oh, a lot of yeses. Obviously, lots of obviously's. Add to my business card, I will. For those of you who are a part of the Star Wars fandom universe. And are we really going there? We got a few of those. All right, I'll give you just a couple extra seconds here. Do you want to become a Jedi Master? Get your vote in if you haven't yet. For those of you that can't quite remember, Jedi is justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And one of the points Dr. Jana was making was adding that justice component starts to create a wraparound conversation that includes some of the racial and social injustice we see historically in our country and the continuing effects and implications of it in our communities and our companies today. And this idea that we're not doing effective D&I work and strategies within professional spaces if we're not addressing the element of justice and its implications or the implications of injustice. All right, end poll. There we go. Yes is the winner. Obviously is a close second. So those are both positive responses. So is add to my business card. So sounds like all of you are excited about that concept. All right. What I would love to do is to introduce our opening speaker for the day. His name is Paul Reeder. He's the executive director of the Center for Innovation Strategies at The Ohio State University. He works there to create a unified and overarching innovation collaboration strategy that maximizes value creation for Ohio State. He works with a number of different departments and units within the university. The Center for Innovation Strategies is positioned or housed within the Fisher College of Business specifically, but it's a very interdisciplinary and collaborative group, as you can imagine. Paul's held a number of other roles within the university, within higher ed, as it relates to commercialization of products and processes, and helping departments within the university go through those systems and processes. He's also founded a couple of companies. I was doing some reading about Paul. I've seen him speak years ago, and have remembered his name and just the presence he brought when he was speaking, and which is one of the reasons why he's here today. I just can't get him out of my head. But he's been in this game for a long time. And so I was doing some reading, and in 1994, he founded a sports design, I guess a sports apparatus design company, and called Zura Sports, and took it so far that Olympic athletes were using his products and equipment. So he's not just the ivory tower thought leader, although he's definitely a thought leader. He's been in the trenches and everything in between. So I am so excited to welcome Paul to the quote unquote stage. Paul, I hope you're there. Are you there?
I am, and absolutely. Thank you for having me. And I'm calling from the trenches today, so that's good.
Awesome. Oh, that's great. Now, Paul, I'm going to try to get to a place where I can see your video. There we go. Now I got you. Okay, Paul. Good morning. Good morning. Morning. Hey, thank you for spending time with us. I'm so honored that you're here.
Absolutely. No, I think this is a great opportunity, particularly now coming, into our 7th month of pandemic, to address a concept around innovation practice in a really difficult time.
Yeah. Well, that's where I want to start this morning. I mean, our original conversation was, hey, just provide some general framework for innovation, in terms of we're going to have this exploratory panel conversation with folks who are doing it, practicing it, exercising it, coaching it. So let's do like kind of an umbrella view. What are we talking about? What are we not talking about? And as you thought about things that you thought would be helpful to share, and we kind of interacted back and forth, it really took on this sort of like, let's contextualize it in the time and space where we're dealing with it, both in terms of COVID and in terms of the increased or heightened visibility about racial injustice and how that's changing things. So if you would, I want to jump right in and ask a question. Right now it's difficult for companies, I think, or they think it's difficult. I don't know, but I'll let you position it, to think about innovation, because innovation feels like it's a few steps down the road. We're in survival mode, and innovation's not that. And so it's hard for them to think about that. They're grappling with the pandemics and all of the effects. Leading question, do you think it's important to keep a strategic focus on innovation right now? More importantly, what are some steps to help them do that? How is that possible? What does that even look like?
So absolutely, not just because I'm in the innovation business, but I think that anytime that there's a disruption in your system, and clearly this has been the biggest disruption I think that I could say that most of us have had in our professional lives. Anytime there's a disruption, you are going to tend to roll back into survival mode. And certainly during this pandemic, with your teams working remotely with unsure future, the tendency is to pull back and to move into survival mode. But I think that I always want to take an optimistic view of innovation and optimistic view. And as I have said, during our pre-discussions, I'm not ignoring the human tragedy, but I look at this as a disruption of legacy systems, right? All of the things that we believed we knew about business, we believed we knew about the way that we were governing ourselves, have now been put into question. So this is a fantastic opportunity for companies or organizations to look at innovation practices and skill sets and recognize that the old way of doing things is no longer going to be the case, that you are going to have to change your operational approach. You're going to have to be more agile. And as you embrace those skill sets, you're going to become less afraid of what could happen to me in the future. I think about this in terms of companies that adapted well to the pandemic. I mean, somebody like Amazon. Amazon was an agile company that was set up to be able to react. Certainly, no one could foresee a pandemic, but having an innovation practice structure that both aligned with your corporate strategy, but also allowed you to be agile and adaptive. That's showing well for the companies that recognize that. Um, so at least preparing for the future, that's one of the things I think that why innovation is important, and not just innovation in operational excellence or incremental improvements, but not forgetting that you have to keep the pipeline full so that when we begin to come out of this, that you aren't going to have a lag in your processes or a lag in your new product development because you've waited.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you say things like operational excellence or disruption of legacy
Yeah.
systems, for you, that's terminology and vocabulary and sort of semantics that you know what you mean. For those of us on the call that don't exactly quite know what you mean, without, you don't have to go into deep
Yeah.
specificity, but what are some of the things you mean when you say stuff like that?
So Daniel, since March, how much cash have you used?
Very, very little.
Right, right. I mean, not only have we realized that we didn't need cash, right? The funny thing is that Gen Z and young millennials already know this, right?
Hmm.
That's a legacy system. So for us to say, wow, it took something like this complete disruption and the massive growth of e-commerce to show us that a legacy system like cash was not necessary in some arenas, right?
Hmm.
But even legacy systems like going to an office and having in-person meetings, excuse me, these were systems that don't necessarily help a company be more efficient. They were conveniences of being in the same place together. Not to say that I would like for us all to be in the same room together. That's wonderful from a social standpoint, but not necessarily a mandatory requirement to be innovative or to drive your company ahead.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting to think about. I guess to me, I think I'm a late millennial. The cash thing was for me already on the way out, so it didn't feel terribly disruptive, like you were saying. But maybe to
Right.
some folks it did. But certainly the idea of gathering together in a room, for me as a professional development, an educator, speaker, and I make a living from bringing people into the room and being with them. That was a
Right.
huge disruption. And just companies in general. It doesn't feel like a legacy system that to do business and have a company like you come to the office. That doesn't feel like a conscious decision we made. It just feels like what is.
Right.
And it takes a deep disruption maybe to shake off it's that way because at one point we chose it and we could choose something else.
That's
That's
right.
really
Well,
interesting to think about it.
I love the just what has moved with remote working, that you have companies, specifically even tech companies, saying my employees can come from anywhere, right? So don't want to for us to stray too far from a diversity and inclusion model. Is that I believe this is inclusive. Now we're saying you don't have to be living in the Silicon Valley to work for a California-based tech company. In fact, if anything, it's opening up an opportunity not just in the U.S. but globally for teams to work together in a remote platform. I also think that it's allowing innovative companies. We work with a company called Miro all the time that does online collaborative brainstorming. That company's massive growth over the last 6 months just exposed their audience to a really fantastic platform that we would not have explored traditionally.
Mm.
And so I think that this is allowing us to recognize that we need to be more flexible in how we are operating on a daily basis. And that mindset, that growth mindset of I can learn, is going to impact other parts of your business.
Yeah. Yeah, I love you. You're already saying it, and I don't want to steal any of the panelists' thunder, but even just thinking about the growth mindset and what that means, the ability to ask questions about something you didn't think was actually a question and answer thing. It was just a thing. Is so
I
important.
also, I mean, I want to tie that back to this conference, right? To me, the growth mindset takes the possibility of a traditional company to recognize the importance of having a diverse workforce, having an inclusive environment. This isn't, the boardroom, the C-suite concept anymore. We have to have this ability to say, I can be flexible. One of the best things that we learned, particularly in education, is that the professors don't know everything. So I apologize to some of the professors out there, but I teach courses as well. And I learn a ton from my students. It's because I want to have this growth mindset that says, I want to listen to one of my students who comes from China, because her understanding of how innovation works at a global market is much more interesting than I'm going to find sitting in my laundry room in Clintonville, right? So that's where I think that having this growth mindset is also a really significant component, not just in innovation, but in understanding how to change your company.
Yeah. Yeah, I know for me, as we think about inclusion, I'll do sessions on leadership development or creating inclusive and culture. And generally, when we're talking about getting people in the room, it's, we're going to bring our executives in and we'll do our senior level directors and we'll have this conversation be really good. And that's wonderful. And they can set the tone. Now that it's virtual, we're sort of starting to see this shift of like, well, why don't we invite everybody? Why isn't this a conversation about creating culture that everybody gets to be a part of? And of course, no one would have verbalized that it's not a conversation that people, can't be a part of because they're not valuable enough or they're not high rank enough or whatever. It was just the constraints of the room holds 60 people who are the best people to be here today for this 2-hour thing.
That's right.
We can expand that and include more people.
Well, and I think there's a real key in that, and that is to be intentional, right? It is too easy to just say let's come back to legacy systems. And there's some legacy systems that drive companies. Performance engines or your core capabilities are what brings the money in to help to fund innovation. But I look at a company like Safelite that's it's based here in Columbus. I had a really interesting conversation with their CEO, Tom Feeney, and he said, you know what, if you want to know about what's innovative and what we should be doing as a company, don't ask me. Go down and ask the 8,000 people that are in the field every day changing windshields, right? Those are the ones who understand our customer. Those are the ones who are seeing the potential change. And that attitude, I recognize Safelite as one of the most innovative companies that I work with because of that attitude. That attitude is everybody can contribute. And so this is why I was really excited when you said you want to include an innovation dialogue with diversity and inclusion, because as we have said in our earlier conversations, innovation doesn't exist without diverse thinking, right? And that diverse thinking comes from experience and your childhood and your parents and the country that you grew up in, the challenges that you had. That diversity allows us to see things differently. And if we can bring that diversity into that conversation and into that C-suite level conversation, that's when you really start to see a robust company viewpoint.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going back to what Dr. Jana talked a little bit about today, that top down and the bottom up. And so much of the people who understand what needs to change sometimes are the people who are at the ground level doing the things that aren't working as well as they know they could be working.
Right. Well, but I don't want to say that that's the only path. There is certainly an important component of having leadership level support, not just support in the form of financial support or sponsorship, but support in taking an innovation initiative seriously, recognizing it as important as engineering or marketing or sales, right? If innovation becomes a component of your company's path and of your core competencies, then everyone who works for you begins to understand that they have to look out for new opportunities, right?
Yeah,
and I think that's really critical. You mentioned earlier that yesterday one of the driving components was data and metrics, and I don't disagree. The challenge is that some people don't think that you can measure innovation, and I'm on the opposite side of that. I really believe, and we see this through our research with the companies that are involved with our center, that certainly you can measure. You're measuring different things, right? This is where some of the challenges with innovation, new innovation initiatives within companies becomes confusing, because too many executives want to measure innovation by traditional business methods. How much revenue is it generating? How quickly? Can I keep my operational expenses low? Well, the general consensus is, well, if you use those metrics, innovation is going to fail, because you can't measure that, right? It's like saying, well, I'm going to have a competitive diver, having come from the aquatic industry, competitive diver, and I'm going to judge them on how fast they enter the water. Well, what if it's sloppy, right? You can't measure them by something that isn't consistent with the function that you're trying to perform.
Yeah, that's so good. I want to ask basically the same question, I think, from the other sort of quote unquote side of the conversation. You're talking about businesses and business leaders thinking about innovation and so forth. But, in this season, clearly, new habits are being formed. People are working from home, figuring out how to do that, homeschooling kids, a lot of folks, and working that into their schedules, social distancing, sort of reprogramming the legacy systems of their own lives and relationships. What habits are you seeing, or what new habits, as sort of, in your social circles or just society in general, are you noticing anything from sort of the workforce end around? Look at all this, I don't know, bridge building toward innovation that we can start capitalizing on because people are sort of renegotiating their own legacy systems.
I think there's some really basic human uh, narratives that are coming up, because we can all talk about working remotely, all of us being boxed within this little Zoom box all day long, the incredibly difficult position that parents of school age kids are in right now, trying to understand how to do their day job and while they're managing their a remote learning situation. But one of the things that struck me first when we all began to move online was that this became a very human platform, that we were all forced to drive this technology. But one of the things that started happening is we began to see kids walking in the background of videos. We see cats walking across the keyboard, and look at this. I mean, I wanted to pull up just a regular, shirt today. I would have been, nicely dressed and tied and maybe even clean shaven, right? But the kind of cool thing is that maybe there's some parts of this that have allowed us to become much more human. We recognize, I hope, that we're all in a challenging situation now. And so we are adapting, and we're showing that we're adapting because we're becoming more casual, becoming um, more tolerant, hopefully, of the fact that people do have children walking through the background.
Yeah.
And so to me, that I know that maybe sounds a little less business-like than we are kind of driving this conversation, but to me, that also is a component of innovation and inclusiveness, that we just have to recognize that some people have differences in their lives, and that their work is going to be disrupted by by just the surroundings, right?
Yeah.
And so that now also says to us, we're going to have to need to be adaptive about what the work schedule looks like, or what we expect someone can get done. I'm a little bit concerned about the fact that we are seeing research saying that productivity amongst American workers is an all-time high right now.
Hmm.
That's actually concerning to me,
Yeah.
because we can't maintain it. We're working too many hours. We're on Zoom too many hours, and that's great from a company standpoint, but it's not great from a human standpoint, right?
Yeah.
So I want to touch on one other subject, because I don't want us to forget that if I'm going to be talking about corporate innovation, that does not exclude organization within government entities or nonprofits or individuals or startups. Um, in fact, I think that this is going to be exciting conversation having Mike Stevens in the next panel, because I think this is an excellent opportunity for governments to reassess what they understand about their legacies, and taking an opportunity to change things around the city. I see conversations about Columbus being a 15-minute city. How can I get to every service I need within 15 minutes? Oh my gosh, that's such a fantastic concept that's going to take some guts first. Like, it's going to be some bravery from somebody to say, okay, we need to make some changes in the way that we know that people manage around the city, and then we have to look at the infrastructure of a city as well. So these are great. Innovation is a great format for conversation of change, right?
Yeah, that's so good. And I want to bring our other panelists in as we're kind of making this flip toward thinking about, or not toward, but you're aptly transitioned us into public sector, which many of the folks on our call are. And so I appreciate that move. And that last thing you said about, having a little more grace toward people and just the humanity of it, not only dovetails really well with Dr. Jana's comments yesterday about, grace is at the heart of so much of this conversation, but also, at least in my limited understanding, and I'm going to ask some questions of you, the panelists, in a minute to let you actually expound, but so much about innovation is human-centric design and thinking. It's figuring out what's working for people and what's not. And so when we increase our appreciation or awareness of what are our people really like? What do they want? What's not working for them? What is working? All the things that you sort of said our awareness of is going up. It feels to me like our ability to innovate within those systems or get out of them or whatever goes up too, because our awareness of what's not working is increasing, because we're paying attention to new kinds of things, and we're thinking about our teammates differently because we see their significant other in the background, or we watch their kids walk across the room and suddenly, oh yeah, I forgot, like you're a person too. Like, how can we make this better for both of us? Because
Well,
I'm a person.
we touched on this in one of our preliminary calls, and I expect that there was a number of conversations around the police departments yesterday, and
Mm.
what is going to be the evolution of how police departments interact in cities. And to me, using design thinking or using a human-centric approach to critical thinking, understand that there is an audience there and that there are two sides of any engagement and relationship. A tenet in innovation is to understand that there are two motivations, and those motivations may not be aligned, right? Or two activities that may not be aligned. And I proposed in that conversation, I would love to have an opportunity to use a design thinking process that really starts with empathy and get people in a room or get people on a Zoom to have more conversations about what are those motivations, what are the individual challenges, because I think that when you begin to humanize very difficult questions will never be easy to answer, but you at least begin to see various viewpoints. And there is nothing better than when faced with a challenge that you can't solve within the four walls of your company than to go ask your customers. I can't tell you how many times I've said that. Have you actually asked them? Like, go ask them. Leave the office, go ask your customer, and that truth will come to you. And so I feel the same way about really challenging government and city structure and state structure. And we're going to have a debate tonight. I would love to hear people talk about how is it that we're going to be changing our attitudes here in the US. I mean, I think these are great conversations to be very human.
That's great. I want to clear the way and bring on our other two panelists and just expand the conversation. So, Rita and Director Stevens, if you want to unmute and turn your video cameras on and join us, we want to bring you into this conversation. Welcome, welcome. I hope both of you made it on. I think I saw both your names pop up. Rita, are you there?
I'm here. Thank you.
All right, terrific. And Director Stevens, are you there?
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you. Well, I want to sort of allow each of you to position yourselves in the conversation as you feel like it works sort of best for you, and so that, I don't know, you can put a flag in the ground in terms of sort of where you're coming from as we enter this conversation. So we've heard some from Paul. Paul, don't go anywhere. You're part of the panel. But hang out for a minute, and I want Rita and Director Stevens to talk. Rita, why don't you start? Just give us a little bit of introduction.
Sure.
In terms of who you are and why you might be speaking on a panel where we're thinking about inclusion as it relates to innovation or vice versa, and then we'll kick it over to Director Stevens.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. As you indicated, my name is Rita McNeil Danish, and I am an attorney. I am a partner with the law firm of Taft, Stettinius & Hollister, but I also own my own business, JD Squared Strategists. But my place in all of this discussion emanates from a career that has been split between the public sector and the private sector. So I had the great fortune of being a city attorney for 3 cities. And I saw one of the questions is, what is your philosophy about innovation in the public sector structure? And so from my perspective, I've had to live it and breathe it in terms of moving from one city to another, being a city attorney, and all the challenges that confront you. In fact, I went to Cincinnati right after the civil unrest in 2001. And so that was a time of significant change for Cincinnati all the way around. And certainly WEPA had to learn how to do things differently. Police had to learn how to do things differently. I ultimately left the public sector and went over to what some call the dark side. And I joined the law firm and started my business. And my business is basically doing the city attorney work from the outside in. But I'm also working with governmental entities, helping them create programs to small minority and women-owned businesses, helping them pivot, helping them do inclusion, and helping them innovate, as well as working with the small minority and women-owned businesses. So I think that, my career, as my husband tells me, has been full of being a change agent and trying to innovate, and particularly innovating in the public sector. I just have the great fortune of doing it from the outside in now.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And Rita, your Zoom headline says Julia. So I just want to repeat your name for folks. You said Rita McNeil Danish.
Julia is actually my first name. I joke
Okay.
and say I'm in the witness protection program, so I have to switch things around. But everyone knows me as Rita.
Okay, got it. Thank you so much, Rita. I want to make sure people can find you again if they want to. Rita McNeil Danish. Thank you. And we're coming back to you shortly. Director Stevens, I'd love for you to do a quick intro just about who you are and what a little bit of the work you do is and kind of how you enter this conversation.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for having me here this morning. Mike Stevens, I'm currently serving as the Director of Development. Prior to that role, I was serving as the city's Chief Innovation Officer. And what I can tell you is when I started in that role a little over 3 years ago, the mayor tasked me with working with colleagues throughout the city to see what we can do to improve our processes and really engage our residents in a way that the services we're providing are as effective and impactful as possible. We're in a time where resources continue, especially at a municipal level, resources continue to be we're resource challenged at times. So a lot of that work we're doing we need to have a different lens on how we approach it. And I can tell you what was really interesting and exciting for me going into that role and working with my colleagues across the city in different departments is innovation is rooted in all the work we do. And people don't recognize that. They think, well, it's a municipality. We're not putting out neat tech gadgets all the time. But I look at our Department of Public Service and I see a group of some of the most innovative people throughout the city. And if you look at how they have it, if you look at our transportation management and how that has advanced and adapted through the years and the decades, we used to have traffic signals that were light bulbs that were just time and, green, yellow, red. Now we're connected through a fiber system that really helps us move traffic in a way that not only for convenient for our residents, but it streamlines that movement. How we manage our infrastructure has continued to advance, and there's innovation in that, and maintaining that infrastructure and the innovation that's shown there. So that's one example. I think that's really, now that I'm leading the development department, I get to see the innovation we're trying to put forth. And I think a great example is the small business ecosystem that the small business team has put out into the community to really, how do we engage all businesses in an equitable and inclusive manner, and make sure they're getting the resources. I've been with the city a couple different times and we've talked about the importance of small business. It wasn't until we went out and engaged the community and engaged those small business leaders throughout the community did we really start having a meaningful impact on those efforts. So I think that's a good overview. Happy to answer any questions and appreciate you again for having me on the panel.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, welcome. You introduce yourself as Mike. Is it okay if I call you Mike through this interview? Okay, great. Thanks. Well, I want to provide just kind of a large zoom up question. Mike, you just talked about, the city and municipality as really innovative, and you get to be a part of seeing that unfold on the inside. In my role and spending time with the people that I spend time with and hearing from folks and planning this conference and working with lots of other groups, there's a real coin, right? A two-sided coin of a lot of people say the city, not Columbus specifically, although certainly people from Columbus have said this, municipalities, public sector, it's not innovative, right? It's status quo, it's stagnant, it's boring. It's about retirement and pension and benefits and so forth. I'm kind of painting the darkest picture of those comments I can just to provide contrast. But I really am excited to unpack what you're saying, and explore the juxtaposition. But to zoom up one level before we do that, and we've got some participant questions coming in too, so I'm going to work those in a moment. But let's pause and just talk about the word or the idea about of innovation itself. What do we mean when we say innovation, and maybe what do we think we mean? And that you, as someone who practices, the three of you, in all the different spheres of influence in which you practice and exercise innovative thinking and processes, what do you think we mean, and how might you help us unpack? Hey, that's not a helpful way to think about innovation, or here is a helpful way to think about it, or whatever. Paul, do you want to jump back into the conversation and start on this question?
Yeah, certainly. I think because in our previous conversations, I have a kind of a cantankerous view of that, right? I think that innovation is one of these words that even though it is in the title of our center, I'm a little bit afraid of it because I think there's such a ubiquitous term used for so many different things, and it's okay. I think it's all right that people use it for different things, but I think you have to be very careful of a word that you and I talked about before, which is innovation theater, right? You'll see companies, you'll see cities, which I completely disagree with anybody who says a city or municipality can't be innovative. I think that's a ridiculous statement by somebody who doesn't understand that innovation doesn't have to happen with the outcome of a product, right? So I think that my biggest concern about is this concept of innovation theater, where you have an organization that says, okay, we know that all of our competitors have now a chief innovation officer, and we need to be able to keep in lockstep. So who wears Converse and seems to be the crazy guy in the corner with tattoos, because that's the innovation person, we should tag them. I think that's a real challenge, because innovation hides in various places of people who can not look like us and not think like us, but recognize the importance of looking for opportunity and looking for change, and being, as I said earlier, brave enough to stand up and say, this is what I think will be better for our organization. So I want us also to be very careful that we can't also recognize innovation as being independent of the company, right? Your strategy has to be tied to the corporate strategy as well. If it's not, you're never going to succeed. You're going to be off on your own island, and that island will be set adrift. So I think we just have to be really cautious of what we mean by innovation and be supportive of it in an honest conversation, and not just wrap a bow around something and say, there we go, we did it. It's over there in the corner. I don't really know what they do, and I don't actually talk to them.
Yeah, that's so good. Rita, I'm going to pause on you just for a second, because Mike just about broke his neck nodding when Paul said, innovation theater. Mike's whole body started moving. So Mike, jump in. How do you want to tag team on that one? And then I'm going over to Rita.
Great. Thanks for giving me that opportunity, because I would have cut Rita off. It would have been like a presidential debate. I'd have been rude.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I think Paul really captures it well when he talks about innovation theater. And I've seen a lot of that even here locally. And as we talk about innovation, the city had the good fortune back in 2016 to win the Smart Cities Challenge by USDOT. And as a result of that, we heard from a lot of vendors and a lot of folks who have great ideas, or as I realized pretty quickly, they had a lot of solutions in search of a problem. It wasn't about the problems that we're facing in our community. How do we solve those? So you have to transition from the innovation theater. And Smart Columbus, when we talked about innovation, we were talking about what were we doing to serve our residents in an inclusive and equitable manner? How are we solving problems that they experience on a daily basis to improve their lives? I think one example is the program we have. In our community, addressing infant mortality is a top priority. So Smart Columbus, working with Celebrate One, identified the problem that expectant mothers had who were receiving Medicaid and were having their transportation provided for them, but that transportation wasn't reliable, it wasn't flexible. So when we engaged with these expectant mothers and learned more about it, we then worked on a solution. Then we innovated based on that engagement on how do we provide transportation and a tool for them to schedule that makes it flexible, that notifies the doctor's office if they're running late. Because what these expectant mothers were sharing is, if the driver is late picking them up and they arrive late at the doctor's office, their appointment had already been canceled and rescheduled. So now they're stranded, might be too strong a word, but they're taking multiple hours out of the day to get to the doctors and have that prenatal checkup. and then it gets canceled. So through this, what we're working on is providing a way to notify the doctor's office, have a reliable and flexible pickup. The other thing is you're only able to be picked up at your residence, your address of record. And so if you had another child that you need to say get over to your aunt's to drop off for daycare, you couldn't be picked up there. So we were putting too many barriers up. But the only way we knew that is by engaging residents. And that's what cities do really well. In the Department of Development, we have a whole planning division that is a community engagement division. And it by engaging residents and understanding what the concerns and their needs are, that's when we can innovate to solutions to solve their problems, as opposed to having really cool gadgets or ideas that are, like I said, are solutions in search of problems. So
Yeah.
I did hurt my neck there on the innovation theater. So Paul, I think that's a great phrase. I appreciate you bringing that up.
Maybe the Office of Diversity and Inclusion will send you a branded hot water bottle, and you can. I love this idea. Paul mentioned the word empathy. In terms of finding the real problem. You said the word engagement, right? We have this sense of empathy of who has a need, where's the need, and then this idea of engagement, like what is the real need? Like Paul says, in his comment there, fall in love with the problem, not the solution. Let's engage with the people and the problem, and then the innovation starts, not the other way around. So I love that just by sort of not random, because all three of you know what you're talking about, but by a random sprinkling of comments, we're already starting to see like, oh, it's not just as Paul said, the creative guy in the corner wearing Converse dreaming up wacky ideas. It's this sort of systemized process of figuring out what needs to be done, what's not working when we try to get it done, and how do we keep iterating on that. So I love it already. Rita, I would love for you to jump into this conversation. We're talking about what do we mean when we say innovation? What do we not mean? Obviously, you can play around with the word innovation theater, or you can take it in your own direction.
Actually, I want to add a third tier to that conversation, and that is talking about the internal resources. So when you talk about your government employees, many people think of the employees who've been there forever and retire. But the reality is they are a vast resource of knowledge. And inherent in those knowledge bases, you have people who have passions, who have meaning, and have an opportunity to innovate internally. And so it's amazing when you are dealing with a number of the employees, regardless of the department, the ideas and concepts that they may have, and the opportunities to create simply because of their experience, their exposure, and their ability to mesh, if you will, the reality of doing business in the public sector and how to get it done with the innovative idea, the creative idea, the way to do things differently. There was a saying many years ago, you got to do more with less. And I'm sure every employee in any municipality or government sector is familiar with the term. And so the reality is the employees are actually innovating every day, trying to figure out how to do more with less. And so I think the third tier of that is the entrepreneur, the employee who is inside coming up with ideas and inventing new ways to do things and innovating.
Yeah, I love that. And as you're talking, the word reframing came into my head. Reframing the way I think about Joe, who's been here for 27 years, and how it's tempting to think Joe's just waiting to click over into a certain amount of tenure and Joe's on the way out and whatever. Maybe I have met somebody like that in my past, and I do a lot of this kind of work when we talk about unconscious bias and the way we filter people, right? Maybe I met somebody like that in my past, but that may or may not be Joe. And if I'm not willing to deeply engage and ask, hey, what do you see across your 27 years that I don't, because I've been here 3, what do you see that I don't? What do you know that I don't? What have you experienced that I haven't? That can be really challenging. It's always a vulnerable position to ask open, earnest questions. But I love that you've hit it right on the top of our conversation. You got to ask those questions and reframe, the folks around you, even when you're tempted not to, maybe. I got a bunch of questions coming in, so I'm just going to throw this question out from the group, because I feel like we're right on the cusp of talking about this, thinking about innovation and who's doing it and some of these processes. And Paul mentioned earlier this idea of measuring. People say you can't measure innovation, and maybe you can. We talked yesterday a lot about metrics, and we measure what matters, and we only expect what we inspect, and so forth. So I want to transpose that into this conversation and ask from one of our participants, how do we measure innovation? What's a decision matrix or a measurement matrix that you use or that your teams use when you think about how to measure what's going on? Anybody can jump in as you want to.
So I think that that's a really fantastic question because, again, too oftentimes I think that organizations that are new to innovation believe that there is a mystery and a science to this. And I wrote in the chat, that structured innovation happens with discipline that is both measured and has objectives, right? Those are not words that might traditionally be associated with people's concept of what innovation should be. But what you have to be aware of that I mentioned earlier is that you can't use traditional business methods of ROI or speed to market or just purely revenue as a way of measure. I think too often, or more often, you need to be recognizing that it is not the end objective with innovation, but it's the process itself. Because if you can measure engagement of employees, if you can measure new projects, if you can put new projects and see how far they go along in your system, then you begin to look at the process of creating what would be, a potential ultimate goal, which is creating a culture of innovation where all of your people think about how do we find new improvement. So you have to just reframe it and not just look at results oriented. Not that results aren't important. Do not do innovation if you don't intend to make change, right? But don't recognize that only that you have to wait till the final result to say, was this a valuable experiment? Because if you look at innovation done correctly, you are going to have a whole variety of little experiments along the way. This is why I love what Jordan Davis and Smart Columbus are doing is they're making little experiments. Let's see if we can get more people to buy electric cars by putting more charging stations around, right? That is a little experiment, and they say, wow, that actually worked. We should try to do that more. That's fantastic because you didn't say we have to create one system that is going to be used for everybody and rolled out throughout. Little experiments, processes along the way are how you measure.
Anybody else want to jump in? Measurement or sort of measurement matrices for when you think about innovation. Rita, Mike?
I think Paul said it best. I don't think that you can measure it. You don't actually look at an outcome. The one thing I do think about, though, is if you have innovation and you have an environment that encourages and fosters that innovation and the experimenting, I think you ultimately have a happier employee and a happier workplace. And maybe that in and of itself is a measurement. You don't have that sense of frustration about being in the workplace, and then inherent in having that, you have meaning and purpose, and you have success in the work that you do.
Yeah, you're talking about this idea of people feeling stuck, and so often when people feel stuck, they just we disengage, we check out, and we can see, Gallup tells us every year or two how many people in the American workforce self-identify as disengaged, and the last measurement was like 80% of the American workforce self-identifies as disengaged, and there are a lot of factors for that, but I think a big one is just feeling like, what's the point anyways? And that's exactly what you're addressing, and to me, that feels innovative. Paul's saying, hey, measure the process, not just the product. That sounds right. That sounds good. I can start thinking about that. You're saying, and start thinking about the environment. You're measuring the environment too. How do people feel? Like that actually matters. It's not wishy-washy. There's an ROI from a business perspective in terms of how people feel when they participate on your team. Mike, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think it's more important just to have that culture of innovation. So when we hit challenges like the pandemic, and as the development director, I was very worried about how is development going to move forward. But I shouldn't have worried that much because our Department of Building and Zoning Services, as a team came together and in a culture of innovation, found a way to continue to issue building permits, continue to review applications. We worked as a city to continue to have public meetings that were historically, in-person meetings. What kind of solutions could we bring forward to do that virtually? And that was through collaboration and understanding the challenges that the different boards and commissions faced, and then and offering a solution for those problems. So I'm not as hung up on measuring the innovation as much as the outcomes of what we need to do in delivering services to residents and make sure innovation's part of that.
Yeah, thank you. I've got a question from a participant that kind of dovetailed with something I want to ask, so I want to throw that one in now. And then we've got a few questions coming in, and I already had one on my sheet that really is for me the brass tacks of a lot of this this space is when we think about innovation. You know, corporate culture generally rewards that differently. Maybe frames failure differently than the public sector. There's maybe less of a status quo. Maybe there's less of we've always done it this way. So I want you to know that conversation's coming. But first, so gird up for that one. First, though, someone asked, does innovation just equal money? When I hear the word innovation, I just hear money. Am I wrong? Simple question, but I assume a more layered answer or a more nuanced answer. And that's to the three of you, and I don't have an agenda about who jumps in first.
I'll go first. From a city perspective, a lot of times we talk about innovation that equates to technology and back to those gadgets and those tools and those programs. So yeah, there are tools, technology tools that make what we do more streamlined, and there's cost associated with that. And I think that's when you've got to measure really, does the dollars we spent and the impact of those dollars, is that having, you know, the maximum value? But a lot of times innovation is beyond just the gadgets and the tools. So it's not always associated with money at the city level. It's how do you collaborate and engage the community, and like I said, really identify the problems that need solutions.
Yeah, so not going right to the spend, let's enter an app development and spend a bunch of money doing that. It's let's talk to some people and figure out what kind of app would serve them in meeting this need that we sense they have. Yeah. Rita, Paul, when I hear the word innovation, I just see dollar signs. Am I wrong? What do you think?
I think to piggyback on what Mike said, if you can create something that is both unique and valuable, then it is an investment well worth making. You know, the thing about innovation is so often, and I think this is true in the government sector, there is this concept of prove it and then we'll do it. And innovation is really about doing it and it proves itself. And so but you got to do a balancing test and you've got to make an assessment. Is it going to be unique and valuable and worth doing that effort? And sometimes you have to step out there and do it. And to one of the points, you have to recognize that you're not always going to have success. You might fail. But in doing so, don't you learn, don't you grow, and aren't you prepared for the next step? Aren't you prepared for the next curve?
I love you. I feel like you and I might be cut from some of the same cloth, because so many of the ways that you think about things, you're seeking to reframe what we think about them and why, and then sort of recast vision. And that was very simple. It's not a cost, it's an investment. And that's a financial principle, but it's a thought principle. It's a growth mindset, right? And I love that you so quickly got to the heart of that. That's awesome. Paul, did you want to jump in on this money idea?
No, I think that Rita just hit it right absolutely on the head, as well as you know, as Mike, is that you have to invest in innovation just as you were investing in R&D and investing in people. So no,
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. Well, let me ask a tail to that question then, because we're talking specifically about dollar signs, but an investment. But a part of the investment in this process is engaging the right kind of stakeholders too, right? I mean, that's part of the spend, maybe, is some of the relational energy to pull people in, or some of the relational investment that you need to pull people in for these collaborative efforts or this engagement, these conversations that need to happen, et cetera. So how do we do that? How do we engage the right kind of stakeholders in these processes that might feel risky, that might fail, that, you know, they're unproven, maybe they don't understand innovation the way we do with this sort of positive lens. Maybe they see it as the crazy guy wearing Converse shoes in the corner kind of thing. Maybe there are people invested in a status quo because, you know, we know that there, you know, positions of power tend to reify themselves, right? And so maybe the status quo really works for some people, which it does. The status quo works really well for lots of people. And so change isn't just a challenging proposition. For some people, it's a redistribution of influence. And so I don't want to over ask the question. How, as we think about the investment process, how do we engage stakeholders that may or may not want to be involved? And how do we bring them into this process with us? Any good strategies? Because I think that's probably where a lot of our participants are in this space right now. Of like, okay, I love all this. This is great. How do I tell my supervisor this? How do I get my manager on board? How do I tell my team, hey, let's stop just being, let's start, doing, or, what do you think? Who wants to jump in?
I'd like to hear Rita. I think that your background with startups is really important to acknowledge. So I'd like to hear your take on this.
So I was sitting here thinking, and the funny thing is, I'm a girl who grew up in Chicago. I won't really quite give the years, but let's say I'm real familiar with the civil rights movement in Chicago and the election of the first African mayor. And what I remember more than anything is imagine a lot of people, I'll just say people with huge egos. And there was a decision, though. There was a goal, there was a purpose that said, we want the first African-American mayor in the city of Chicago. And all of those people found themselves inside of a church. And the statement was, leave your ego at the door. And they're inside the church, and they said, we will walk out with one candidate. And they did. And that candidate was successful. I tell that story because I think at the end of the day, purpose brings us together. Meaning brings us together. Commonality brings us together. And that commonality doesn't mean we look alike or we act alike, because we are all very different and diverse. But having that meaning and that purpose and that common goal, we can be in the same church in different pews, but we do have the same focus. And that brings everybody together and creates that team.
Creating shared vision, shared purpose. That's so powerful.
I think I also got to hit on the leave your ego at the door. Like that is a mantra that starts with every conversation that we have, which is, you cannot believe that you are the one knowing when you come to innovation, because, I want to touch on something you said earlier. Like, here's the person who's maybe been with this organization for 27 years and maybe they love the status quo. Put them in a room with a 20-year-old and then all that changes, right? Because then the 20-year-old starts to understand, wow, this company was built on people who just did a great job for a long period of time and outlived a lot of other companies. But it also can change. And we have found more innovation coming from that 27-year veteran paired with a 20-year-old intern who doesn't understand that they can't do things, right? So that purpose becomes so important. And this is a real challenge, is to get people who have enough sort of authority within an organization, but recognize that their ego cannot drive this, that's never going to be the place from which a new thought is going to come. So I think that's a fantastic point.
Mike, anything to add before we move on there?
No, I thought that was really well said by Rita and Paul. So,
all right, good. Well, it reminds me, Paul, the way you just framed that in the that 27-year-old 27-year veteran, put him with the 20-year-old newbie in the company, and kind of allow both of them to help one another level up. It reminds me of a lot of the work that those of us who work in kind of the diversity and inclusion space do around generational conflict in the workplace, which is one of the most sort of conflict-ridden danger zones, because you've got real and or perceived deep disparities between generations in the workplace. And I was working with a company that was really challenged by that. They had a lot of Gen Z coming in and a lot of baby boomers near moving out, and not a lot in between. And so every single meeting, every single conversation felt like this culture clash. And the work there was really around reframing what's happening, right? I mean, why does this 21-year-old have a company to work at that has a salary to pay? Because this baby boomer over here created the company and kept it alive through all of the seasons of its growth and development, and suffering, and things aren't working and coming back, and all the things over that person's 27-year tenure. And so this creation of like mutual empathy, mutual respect, where we started the whole conversation around innovation. So good. All right. I want to ask this and then move really into the public sector space. But I see a couple questions that kind of queued this one up for me. Is innovation, in your experience, or how you prefer to talk about it, I guess, is it more of a personal thing that each person shows up as the very best version of themselves and they contribute that all of their unique individualism to the team, and that's what innovation looks like? And so those individuals, those of us on the call, need to be thinking about, how do I show up personally, and what does that mean for my team, and all those things? Or is it really more of a dynamic that's shaped by policy and practice and procedure, systems within an organization that allow for failure without punishment, that allow for question asking with impunity and those kinds of things? So is it more of a personal sort of not necessarily personality trait, but person driven, or is it more practice, policy, procedure driven? I'm guessing a lot of the response might hedge somewhere in the middle, but I really want to hear how you kind of explore those two dynamics.
So, if you might have seen, I also had sort of a visceral reaction. You're like, I don't mind that. I really certainly believe that innovation is a process. I don't think it's a policy, right? Our experience has shown that if you start to make innovation policy, then you lose the inspiration and you start losing the ability to be flexible, because you're saying, oh, by the way, between 10 and 11, you're going to be innovative. That's policy. You better go do it. And that's what we expect from you. That's I think it's a really difficult position to be in, but it absolutely is a practice. It absolutely is a process. It's a process that will continue to the point that it becomes more culturally ingrained in your organization. And I think it does somewhat start with, that first person, whether it's the CEO or it's the mayor, who says, I think we need to really look at an innovation initiative while we're still maintaining the core of our business, right? This is where I want to get back very quickly to the status quo question. We're not saying that all things that are status quo within any organization should change to be innovative. Buses still have to run, sidewalks still have to be maintained. Like the core of the work has to still be done, but it doesn't mean that you have to have one without the other. But I think that the individual starts with the inspiration, right? When I can tell you right now that when Rita walks into a room and she says, look, I'm here to try to think differently, that inspiration and that willingness to leave that ego aside is what inspires other people to say, like, oh, maybe I don't have to be quite so worried about what my position is, or that I don't have a voice in this company. She's just inspired me. I mean, I was so excited when the city of Columbus hired Mike as a chief innovation officer. That is an acknowledgement that says we are going to be innovative in the way that we think about things. It's going to have a seat at the table. So that's that. It had to be somebody who takes that and has that individual courage to get the ball rolling, but then the group begins to be inspired. And to me, that's where policy becomes a concern, right? Policy seems rigid. Policy seems like you must. So I'll leave that open for the other group to.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Who wants to jump into that?
I would agree that it's the individual, but I agree that on both sides, to the point that you get to the policy, is an openness and a willingness to listen and try. And so you can't just come in with all your glory and all your desire for change and be your best self, because it requires an openness amongst everyone to listen, to collaborate, and to think about it differently. And inherent in that openness is you end up having policy change, because if you are at the top and you are willing to be open and receptive, then you will end up ultimately with some different ideas, a reception of ideas, and perhaps the innovation in of itself.
I think that's really well said, Rita. And we also need to have our leaders and our members of our teams know that failure is okay. I think from a city municipality perspective, we're very risk averse, because depending on the size of the failure, you're reading about it in the local paper. You might have residents who are fighting against the kind of that status quo, or fighting for that status quo. We're going to come down and testify and attack might be too strong of a word. So and Paul's right, it can't be a policy. It's how we, part of our process, and engaging with people and understanding that this might not work, and we've got to be okay with that, and learn from that. And I think from a private sector perspective, it's a little easier because your failures aren't as public, and the amount of money you spent on testing and piloting something isn't as public as well. So those are the challenges I think we face at a local level for innovation. I can tell you though, with around diversity and inclusion, I think that's all about innovation, because that's changing some of the practices that the cities, or the city of Columbus or any city, have had in place to say, okay, we need to be more inclusive, we need to be more equitable, and challenging those policies that might be limiting opportunities for individuals. So when I work with Dr. Stalling Johnson, I know it's about innovation. It's about improving opportunities for those businesses, those diverse businesses in our community. So I think that's really important that we continue to focus on that.
Yeah, you opened up two doors so well, and I want to walk into both rooms. So I'll take the last one you said, then I'll come back to this idea of municipalities and public sector being risk averse and how that creates a layer to this innovation process. But I want to enter first the room. You were just talking about this relationship between innovation and diversity and inclusion. Whether we're talking about private or public sector, there is a relationship, and I think most people have seen enough Forbes articles or something to be able to say, more diverse teams lead to more innovation. That's a thing that I think someone researched. Pretty sure I read an article about that. And this is for all three of you, but and Mike, you can stay on first if you want. What does that really mean when we think about the relationship between diversity, which is, for the sake of this conversation, maybe is who's in the room as we talk about practice, policy, and procedure, needs, engagement, all that kind of stuff, and inclusion. What does the room feel like when we're having this conversation, and whose vote really counts when it's time to vote? What is the relationship in sort of concrete terms for you and your experience as you think about these things, and as they relate to innovation?
I know for me, it's if we're trying to solve a problem, we need to have diverse voices around the table. And like I said, or we're going to have a solution in search of the problem, or we're going to have a solution that doesn't meet the problem. So I think who's in that room, who we're engaging with, and having that discussion is really critical.
Yeah, Rita, Paul.
So you mentioned there are luckily there are really good papers, from Harvard Business Review and other academics talking about the value of diversity and innovation. But we see it really on a daily basis with programs that we run at Ohio State. We have a program specifically called OnRamp, where we very intentionally, and I think this is an important word we've talked about before, very intentionally bring our student interns in for their diversity. And I mean that across a whole variety of things. Their diversity of thought, their diversity of majors, the culture they've come from, their gender, their race, because we found through experience, very, very practical experience, that having a philosophy major and a neuroscience major and a business major who's a Chinese exchange student make a great team. And they might have points of controversy. I think that we've sort of had a very consistent love fest this morning, but the point is that innovation should also be a little bit contentious, right? And so I love it when our students start saying, like, well, can I disagree with that? And you're like, yeah, you can. In fact, you should. Like, this is the way we understand how we think differently. Otherwise, we end up with these homogenous solutions that may, in fact, solve no one's problem. So this is where I think that you have to be super intentional about diversity when you begin to put together teams, if you get to put together a thought process. You're never going to get to any sort of culture of innovation without being honest and realistic about where all of this starts.
Rita, you want to jump
I
into
actually
that?
wanted
Saw you
to
unmuted.
piggyback on what Paul said, and that is the intentionality in terms of creating teams. And one of the things that is inherent in government is its hierarchy. There's hierarchy all over the place. There's a lot of hierarchy, obviously, in police and fire, but there is inherent hierarchy in the municipal system. And if we can eliminate some of that and create teams and create diverse teams, and as Paul said, diversity means so many things. It means gender, it means race, but it also means, as you were talking about the baby boomers and the Gen X's, it means bringing all these different people together. In law school, my best friend was from the country and I was a city girl. We're talking about diversity that just, it captures everything. And in capturing everything, it does a number of things, as all the studies have shown, but it teaches and it creates all kinds of innovation and different thoughts. And so I think that one of the things we should begin to do is work across teams and kind of eliminate to the extent possible. And that is a challenge, as some of the comments are reflecting, in the government system, but try to create an environment that we begin to work in teams across departments. And I've seen, you know, some of the smaller municipalities, they do that, you know, especially with CARES dollars. They're beginning to work in teams, bringing everybody in from development to the mayor's office, et cetera, et cetera. But working in those teams begins to eliminate and create that diversity and eliminate that barrier that policy could create or that hierarchy will create.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I'm just noticing how connected some of these things are, and we're getting a lot of questions about the hierarchy, the policy, the folks who don't want to change, the status quo, all that kind of stuff. And I don't think the flip side of pushing against all that is saying no more titles, no more roles, no more responsibilities. I don't hear you saying that, but I do hear you saying those are complicating, mitigating factors to the process of engaging with good ideas, because all the good ideas come veiled in how powerful is the person behind the idea, and who do we need to pay attention to? How do we need to politic in this space? You know, and that's true public and private, right? Because there are hierarchies all over the place. But it is true, I think, that in the public sector, those hierarchies are, they're more visible. The accountability measures are often more visible, and that creates, like Mike was saying, that this risk-averse culture, which makes it really challenging to encourage your teammates to go fail. And then your department, you know, is the subject of a dispatch headline about how much money you wasted. And that's sort of a joke, but it's not at all, right? I mean, that's the reality here for folks, especially those working in teams that feel like this isn't working well. I think I can help it work better, but I don't have the oomph behind me to make that move. Somebody asked the question earlier, are there any just kind of cookbook recipes for innovation? What is that first couple steps for me if I see X problem and I'm not seeing anyone else address it, and maybe I'm the only one that sees it? Like, what are the first couple of ingredients that you would just say, hey, think about these two things, these three things first? I don't even know if that question kind of makes sense to you, but I think a lot of people are feeling that, you know, in the chat room. And so I want to give you the opportunity to respond to it.
Cookbook, that's a great.
Paul, you unmuted.
Yeah, the cookbook is curious, because that came up in the chat, and my response was, you know, it's when they liken it to this recipe, right? And I sort of maybe play on that analogy of a recipe. You have to start by opening the book, right? Like, okay, what should I know? What don't I know about what I might try, and what experiments I might run, or what assumptions I might make about the growth of my company, or operational excellence, or whatever achievement you're trying to make through this innovation practice. You have to start somewhere. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a center at Ohio State looking at best practices, right? But I think the point is that you can't just say, here's a recipe and follow it. Just like a recipe. I mean, if I said around this table, okay, we're coming into apple pie season, put up your apple pie recipe, they would not look the same, right? Because everybody feels differently. Like, your company's different, your company's no different than a family, right? Somebody says, well, you need to put nutmeg in there. You're like, oh, you're saying that is blasphemous. Why would you put that in there, right? But to me, this is the kind of cool thing about innovation, is that the cookbook is ever evolving, right? I mean, it is ever evolving. This is the kind of cool thing that I find, that, you know, innovation is not necessarily something that somebody learned in college. They might have gone to D school and they learned about something, right? And they think they know design thinking, which is fine, but that there's right now no major, and I'm going to keep pushing for the fact there will be no major in innovation, because innovation is a thread that runs through your skill set, right? and it's a growth mindset. And so just like a recipe, you're going to experiment, and we should be experimenting and constantly changing the recipe. So there is not, to me, in my opinion, a rote direction. Follow these steps and you will be innovative. Here's your certificate, congratulations.
Yeah. Yeah. Rita or Mike, you want to jump in?
I was just going to, well, first I was laughing, Paul, because my example would be macaroni and cheese, because everybody is very serious about their macaroni and cheese and would never do certain things. But I was laughing about, so you're absolutely correct. But if I can go a little bit 180 and also go back to hierarchy when we talk about that and say it is the role, at least in that hierarchy, of that person at the top that says it's okay to experiment. And I know Paul doesn't like that word, and it's okay to fail. And, that is probably a later discussion, because it is traumatizing to be on the front page of the paper. That is very real. But I will quote Governor DeWine, in the beginning with Amy Acton and everything, and he said, "The buck stops with me." And so in creating that environment that fosters that experimentation, there has to be that sense that someone says the buck stops with me, and that you are free to experiment and innovate. And it may go left, it may go right. But what I used to tell my employees is it's not so much what went wrong, but how do we fix it? And so I think that's also part of it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Mike, any recipes you want to share with us?
Not for me.
I want to touch on that point real quick though, about failure. Like, I recognize that it's a horrible thing to try something and then have it very publicly fail, right? But what I would do is I want to change, and I'm not trying to play a semantic game, but I want us to rethink what failure means in a traditional sense, right? Because I want us to be using terms like, look, we're going to make an experiment. We're making assumptions. Assumptions are never right every time. But let's play the recipe analogy. I tried to put something else in this thing and it tasted horrible. Well, then you failed. Don't ever try that recipe again. Well, no, why don't you just try something else? So there was a question earlier in the chat about how expensive innovation is. And I think that what Rita pointed to, which is really important, is that you have to learn. You have to say, how can I spend a little to learn a lot? What is it that I can do in an experiment that may fail? Yeah, but it also may be a great learning experience. I'm like, wow, don't do that. That didn't really work the way that we intended, but now we know that didn't work. And so how do we learn from that?
Yeah.
It's not recontextualizing the concept of failure as truly an experiment, as people talk about fail forward and all this, but failure is a word that has so much meaning attached to it that it just is not fair to use it in terms of this type of activity.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm thinking, when I think about the recipe, and I'll let you three weigh in if there are other ideas that either I missed or you want to add in. But, when you open a recipe book and you're going to bake bread, everybody's maybe has a different, or pie or cake. Okay. There are different kinds of recipes, but if you open a recipe book to bake something, probably, there's going to be a rising agent involved in this recipe. There's going to be some kind of binding agent. There's going to be some kind of grain or flour component. There are some big pieces that are involved, even when the recipe differs. And so maybe rather than saying, what's the recipe, here's the exact steps, maybe we zoom up a layer and say, what are some of the things, the ideas, the processes that we want to participate in? So what I've heard you earlier say is the process of empathy, engaging in strategically or intentionally, as you said, thinking about what problems exist for me, for my team, for the people that my team serves. Engagement with the people who are experiencing that problem, reframing cost versus cost versus investment in that space, reframing the idea of failure into maybe experimentation or iteration or whatever word your department decides is, has a positive, forward moving feel. What other kinds of things am I missing in terms of, just here are some markers in the process? If we think about design thinking, for instance, as one of the ways to do quote unquote innovation, you could look at, there are these 6 words that I think about. And we don't have to be that specific, but are we missing other big qualities or components in this recipe? Empathy, engagement, reframing cost versus investment, reframing failure. Anything else any of you want to throw into that?
The only thing I would throw in, which obviously Columbus is doing really well, is piloting. You don't have to hit it and make one major change. You can start small. You can see if this is effective, if it meets the needs that you have identified as your problem. So you start with a small pilot and you grow from there. So I only would add that you don't have to do a big change. You don't have to like throw it out there all at once, but you can do a pilot and
Mm,
test it.
mm. Got it. What else? Anything else?
I also like the idea of don't overlook lack of experience as lack of vision. There are so many fantastic startups. Columbus has really got a great ranking and a really wonderful support system for startups and small businesses, and then established small businesses that are going to grow into larger businesses. And just because a business is young or not big does not mean that they don't have innovative ideas, right? So let's not assume that every large corporation or every big government entity has all the answers. I think that's part of that growth mindset is being open to explore unfamiliar concepts and how they might apply to what your organization is doing. And this is where I love the fact that we are having this conversation with both, with a private company, with a government entity, and an academic, because this, I'm not posing myself as an academic, but representing Ohio State, is that these are practices that can be applied to anything. And so, but I do think that the notion that it can be wide open. You asked a question earlier that also said, if given no, in our previous conversations, if given no constraints from a financial standpoint, would that be a path you'd follow? And I actually don't like that concept at all. I think that I like constraints. I want you to be able to say, I want you to operate within these known entities, right? Because then you create urgency, you create, a team purpose. And I think that that's really important to do. So let's not, in this conversation of how to frame up innovation, let's not forget that, a financial component is important.
Mm. Yeah. Any other ideas before we move on to the next question? We're entering participant question zone, and they are flooding in. I think I want to ask this one because it's just very on the nose in terms of sort of the cultural energy. It says, how can cities innovate to deal with present day challenges around diversity and inclusion? And maybe more specifically, this person says civil unrest, systemic racism, the pandemic, et cetera. And rather maybe than say, here is my solution to fix the country, because I'm not positioning any of the three of you on the debate stage. We're not voting for any of the three of you. You don't have to give us the magic pill to solve these historic and really complicated challenges, or sort of in terms of the pandemic, unknown challenge. So please don't feel like, what we're looking for is your magic, your magic pill. But as you think about these big, complicated problems, some of which are bound up with history and conflated with lots of other things, like, it's not just a racial issue. It's very much conflated with class. It's very much conflated now with geography and where we live and how we do that. And now with food. And so, and new stuff like the pandemic, untested, uncharted waters. I don't know. Where do we go? How does innovate? How does someone who says, I want to be innovative in the way I do life and do work, how do they start thinking about some of these really big challenges?
Lean in, right? You have to say, okay, I'm going to participate. I'm going to contact the city. I'm going to say, hey, I have an idea about something, and not just an idea. I think that Mike had a great point earlier when he said, we get this smart city money and all of the ideas come out of the woodwork, right? But I also think there's opportunity that you have to first lean in and say, I acknowledge that I might be able to help. I have a skill set or an experience or viewpoint that might be valuable, and I'm going to do my part to just participate.
Yeah, I'm taking notes here. Lean in, participate. What I hear you saying is choose intentionality.
Yeah.
Is that? Yeah.
That's actually what I was going to say. I was going to say, give some intent back to the people, give intent back to participants, and let people be free to share that intentionality, give them meaning, give them purpose. You know, I've said that earlier. Don't make it complicated. Keep it simple. You know, identify a simple purpose and work on that purpose or that goal. And recognize that great ideas, as Paul shared, come from everywhere. They don't come from the boardroom. They don't come all the time from city council. They don't come all the time from the mayor. They very much may come from that Gen X employee who just started working at the city, or they may come from that employee who's been here 30 years, about to retire, and has a few thoughts he wants to share, he or she wants to share as he departs to retirement. It can come from anywhere. And then I wouldn't lose the concept of then building the team. And I'll just share one small snippet. And I shared with you that I went to Cincinnati right after the civil unrest, which seems like, wow, here we are again. But the civil unrest in Cincinnati in 2001. And what was most amazing is you had representatives from the community, you had representatives from the FOP, you had representatives from the administration, that being City Hall, representatives from police, and then you had representatives from the court. And I won't tell you that at the beginning that it was warm and fuzzy, because it was not. One of my favorite stories is the magistrate saying to the police department, if you don't come ready, bring your toothbrush. In other words, he was going to put them in jail. So that gives you a sense of where we started. But the agreement is called the Collaborative, and it is now heralded as the best agreement between police and community in the country. And it is because you brought all those people to the table representing a different group, a different constituency, and they got to share, and they got to come up with ideas on how to do things better, and inherently they innovated just by having all of those voices at the table.
Is that collaborative, Rita? Somebody was asking earlier, what are other cities doing? You know, if we live in Columbus, which many of the participants do, what are other cities doing? So since you just addressed one, is that publicly available? Is there a place that we can go to see some of that? If you want to drop a link to that in the chat box at some point in the next couple of minutes, if there's a website folks can look at.
It is readily available, but what I will try to do is get the link before we are done today, and it can be put in the chat box. But yes, the Collaborative is public through the City of Cincinnati, and yes, you can access it.
That's great. That's great. And building that diverse team of voices, varied perspective. And when you were mentioning some of the groups, you know, what I'm seeing in my head are different spheres of influence with different goals, really. Stakeholders who are politicking or sort of hanging on to different kinds of power or different levels of power that they exercise and then benefit from in different kinds of ways. And somehow you get all those people into a room, maybe under threat of imprisonment, and you figure it out, which we know doesn't always happen. I mean, that result is not guaranteed. But that result is certainly guaranteed not to happen when you don't bring the voices into the room and give it a shot, right? Mike, as we're talking about this, what kind of thoughts are you having as we think about addressing some of these large, you know, challenging issues?
I think labeling something innovation and expecting that's going to be a magical cure for some of these problems is, you know, is misleading. We will struggle. I think it's been said here, there's some simple solutions that are innovative. There's some high-tech solutions that are innovative. It's that engagement and as Paul said earlier, leaning in and having people come together and talk through the problem is probably, you know, it doesn't sound, you know, some people say, that's not innovation. We've been doing that for centuries here in this country and the cities, but that's leading innovation, is getting the voices and hearing out ideas and seeing what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, so good. And Rita, were you going to say something? No. Okay.
So I wanted to do is comment on one thing that you just said, which I think is, again, I'm playing a bit in semantics, but I think that the important concept within organizations is not who has the power to innovate, but who has the permission to innovate. I mean, I think there's a big step difference in someone saying, you know, I'm the king and I have the power, you must now innovate, as opposed to I am at a C-suite level and it's my dollars that I'm committing to, and I'm giving you the permission to now look for something different. And and look for how you can improve. But you know what? This is by no means an easy process. There's really smart people and large organizations that spend a ton of cash, and the experiment didn't work very well.
Mm.
And the best ones are the ones who said, "Wow, that didn't work. We should really think differently." I think there's also a real challenge. There's a lot of discussion in the chat about, how do you set this up? One of the points that we have seen more common in practice is it's very difficult to take someone from within your organization and say, okay, now you are in a position to grant permission for innovation, right? When the city of Columbus recognized that we should bring in Mike as from at that time an external perspective, that's important because you have to have someone have the sort of new reins and have it their full-time job, right? This was something that also came up in the chat, is that too often times companies will say, well, it's your part-time job, so I want you to be innovative part-time, but keep doing your work, and that's your job, right? That part of that commitment is that you have to acknowledge that somebody has to have this job, right? And someone needs to be the one who's looking after it and tracking the metrics and taking the hits for failure. And that is not an easy job. That is because you're not just able to say, here's my ROI. You have to be a very brave kind of soul to decide that I'm going to be in this position for maybe an organization that you didn't grow up in, right? You don't have some of that established credibility.
That's a really great point, and one I want to. In our last couple minutes together, there have been a couple comments in the chat box about it, and I think feels like the right place to close. And Paul just kind of opened the door, saying, giving permission instead of power. To use Dr. Jana's phrase from yesterday, that feels like a calling in, right? To give permission to somebody to innovate is like calling them into the room, calling them into the group, calling them into the team, saying you belong, your ideas are valued, heard, seen, respected. And there's been some commentary in the chat box about trust, this environment of trust as being like a necessary ingredient, I guess, to stay on the recipe thing. Can you comment in our last couple minutes together, just comment on what the environment should look like, needs to look like, could look like when we think about calling people in, giving permission, establishing trust? What do you have to build on your team? For those of us on the call that are team leaders, what is it that you're working toward building to create an environment on your team or within your team where people feel like they can raise their hand and say, hey, I've got an idea, which is a really vulnerable thing to do. So what do we think about trust and calling in and those sorts of ideas?
I would say a sense of partnership, a sense of we're in this together, versus what also often happens is a sense of blame. So rather than there be the finger pointing or the blame association, there is a sense that we are in partnership, and so together we shall solve X problem, or we shall create a solution to X problem. And inherent in doing that, you build that trust. And if the employee sees that occurs, or sees that something goes wrong, and you are not immediately thrown under the bus, if you will, then that in and of itself begins to build that trust and creates an environment of trust that allows you to then want to think outside that box, to then think creatively and step out there, and even step out there in a way that is a positive reflection on everybody so that everybody wins.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And especially when you're in a larger organization like a City of Columbus, where you have different departments, that cross-functional, cross-departmental trust and collaboration is really important to have to successfully innovate ideas and solutions, because the way we're operating now, it's not one department that's totally responsible for delivering on anything. And that's why, as I talk with the development team, it's critical, as we do a lot of our small business work, that we're engaging with the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, because our goals align, and the voices that are being brought to the table, we need to be as inclusive as possible there. So it's that trust is really critical.
Paul, any final comments on that from you? Just want to give you the chance. No.
Nope, I agree that social safety is just really paramount to hearing voices.
Yeah, absolutely. People, we miss all the great ideas and the innovation that might be right? When we don't hear what they are, and we don't hear what they are when people feel like it's not safe to share. And we've seen a big shift in leadership development spaces from a focus, at least in, conversations that I get to be a part of, in shifts from really, and we talked about this yesterday, looking at competencies to asking for qualities and kinds of people rather than just competency seeking, which, to be honest, is another part of the challenge of the public sector, right? Because so much of the hiring is done through the lens of specific competencies and the civil service exam and so forth. And I think there's a whole conversation that we don't have time to have now, but could be useful to have as we think about that. So, all right. Thank you for being with us this morning. Paul, Rita, and Mike, your expertise and experience is clear, and so grateful that you were here with us this morning. If you're in our audience, would you throw a thank you up into the chat box and thank these three for their participation today? We really appreciate you helping us move this conversation forward. All right. At this time, we're going to move into a quick break. We've got a really exciting component to our conference today and tomorrow. There are so many comments and questions in the chat box, and I'm getting texted stuff. We just simply don't have time to get to them all in the context of the panel discussion. And we knew this was going to happen, and we wanted to facilitate as much engagement across this platform virtually as we can. And so we're going to head into a quick break to give you a chance to go fill up your coffee or hit the restroom or do the things that you need to do, stand up and stretch out. And while we do that, we'll watch a couple of videos and I'll let you know what those are going to be. We'll let you know in a second. And so we'll take about a 10-minute break till 10:40. And when we come back together, we're going to break into small groups. And you can see the small group questions. I'll have the website up in the chat box where you can get those questions. You were also emailed those questions from the Eventbrite page this morning. And you can feel free with your breakout group to take the conversation wherever you want to take it based on this panel and ways that we did or didn't talk about some of the things that you wanted to explore. I want to introduce again and bring to the stage Katrina Cannon. She is the Workforce Diversity Manager, and she is going to let us know what videos are coming up for this break.
Hello, everyone. And again, thank you for participating in today's conference. So across this conference, we talked about inclusion and now today innovation. And my team and I were very intentional in providing you with a variety of resources and supports in creating a more inclusive environment. Today, the videos will encompass emerging trends in diversity and inclusion, how diversity and inclusion drive innovation, and lastly, neurodiversity, which is something you will definitely be hearing about on the horizon. So please sit back and enjoy, take a break, and enjoy your videos.
Educating our employees on diversity is not going to work. Just telling them it's a great thing to do is not going to get them into action. You see, we have to tie it to the language of the dollar. We have to make it relevant to them. And who in here works for an organization that's leadership does not want more profitability and more agile companies?
We want people at the table who think differently. I completely agree. We need people at the table who think differently. But where does that come from? Our intersectional diversity dictates the experiences we have in the world.
The amount of change, the amount of technological advancement that happened in the year 2000 will be replicated every 30 seconds in the year 2020. Is that crazy? That's math that makes my head explode.
And with the technology that's coming online, with AI, with some of it, can we innovate our way out of it? And will that be the way that we create the opportunities?
Variation in natural systems is something that will provide you with the ability to adapt to a changing environment. This is science fact.
Additionally, every contribution is necessary, and no one can fulfill every role along the growth curve by themselves.
Let's talk about diversity for a minute, because when we define it, most people automatically think about demographics. What does a person look like? What's their socioeconomic situation? What's their race? What's their gender? That is a huge part of diversity, and it's necessary. But there's also cognitive diversity. And cognitive diversity includes the way we think, and it also includes technologies like artificial intelligence and cybernetics.
This is part of the strategy. They are looking at this, not really, it's the right thing to do, but more than that, there are now business justifications that are in place that make this an important focus area.
The business case for diversity is made. Anybody in this room doubt that? Do we need to spend conversation time really pressing that case?
Cold Sky Group really nailed it. They absolutely gave me so much to think about and a lot for me to take to my clients.
No, now there's something in systems theory, in cybernetics, called the law of requisite variation. So you kind of have to have the ability to think in a way that matches the level of complexity of the system that you're thinking in. If you don't have that match, you're going to probably not survive.
The conference or symposium is actually giving me ways to think outside of the box and how to really help my company and be able to continue to grow and thrive in this ever-changing environment.
So this idea of transactional to transformational, we have to transform ourselves first.
Technology is getting faster and faster and faster.
It's more than counting quotas.
I think when we talk about diversity, we don't talk enough about the value of those perspectives. We only talk about minorities or women, but really, I think everybody has a better and healthier conversation. We all are able to go further faster by working together in diversity. And I think this symposium really highlighted that diversity is truly an asset. And I'm really excited that I got a chance to be a part of it.
Why does diverse teams matter when it comes down to developing and executing many ideas? And it comes down to it because diverse teams create exponentially more ideas, which suggests that you can develop breakthrough strategies through the explicit use of diversity and inclusion. What I'm saying is that if you have a diverse team, you have a better shot at coming after any challenge or any opportunity because they're looking at it from perspectives that others hadn't seen before. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. We have this hospital in Cambridge in the UK, and they have a particular challenge, right? So every time they're transferring patients from the surgical unit to the intensive care unit, you have two separate teams trying to manage this patient. And because you have two separate teams, you have an issue around collaboration. And because there's this issue of collaboration, there's errors, and these errors can sometimes be fatal. So now the hospital is trying to solve this problem. And the obvious thing to do would be to look at how have other hospitals solved this problem? What is best practices in this field? But they did it. Instead, they teamed up with McLaren to try to understand what happens at a pit stop in a Formula One car race. And when they started looking at it that way, they realized that there are connections between what happens in the op room and in the hospital and what happens at a pit stop crew. And once they started to take lessons from that, they were then able to reshift how they thought about collaborating between these teams and drop error rates and save lives. So now the pit stop model is one that is spreading in hospitals around the world. You can see that the diversity of the team, if leveraged, makes the team faster, particularly under these circumstances. Makes them leaner. So, to wrap up, use diversity and inclusion to drive innovation.
Neurological differences like autism or ADHD are considered to be dysfunctional disorders and disabilities under the medical model of mental health. There's too little attention given to enabling people with neurologically different minds to be accepted for themselves, to discover and celebrate their strengths, and to find a place in society that values their differences. When most of us think of diversity, we think of things like race or sexual orientation, but there's a different kind of diversity you might not know about, neurodiversity. Neurodiversity is the concept that neurological differences among people should be recognized and respected. I believe it's time for this new social movement, the neurodiversity movement, to take off. Neurodiversity is a part of our genetics and of our evolution as a species. The genes for autism and ADHD are not errors, but rather are the result of variations in the human genome that have and will continue to have advantages for society. One of the genes associated with ADHD, the DRD4 gene, is known as the novelty-seeking gene. It arrived on the human evolutionary scene over 10,000 years ago. Genes associated with autism also go back more than 10,000 years. Research suggests that genetic variants linked to autism might have been positively selected during human evolution because they contributed to exceptional memory skills, heightened perception in vision, taste, and smell, a precise eye for detail, and an enhanced understanding of systems such as animal behavior. These characteristics likely remain in the gene pool today because they are still advantageous. As a psychologist advising the parents of differently wired kids, I tell parents they have a choice between trying to change the child to fit the environment and changing the environment to fit the child. There are many different microhabitats and subcultures in our world. For an individual with autism or ADHD, finding success on their own terms may come from discovering the particular niche that fits best, the niche that allows their strengths to shine and their challenges to be minimized. Individuals with ADHD tend to thrive in situations of rapid change, variety, and that reward creativity and out-of-the-box thinking. A career as a comedian, detective, entrepreneur, journalist, actor, EMT technician, or photographer could be. I'm not saying that having autism or ADHD is easy. And I don't mean to downplay the real suffering that can be caused by having a neurodevelopmental condition, disability, or difference. But it's also time the world sees the beauty and value in brain differences. Neurodiversity might be every bit as crucial for the human race as biodiversity is for life in general. My vision is for a neurodiversity tolerant and accepting society where differences are celebrated for the depth and dimension they bring to the human condition. I want children whose brains are wired differently to be encouraged to find their niche instead of changing to fit other people's ideas of normal. Diversity in every sense makes our world a better place, and people who think differently are a huge part of that.
That last one hit kind of hard. So powerful. I am thankful for the team, primarily Katrina Cannon and Jordan Kaiser, who pulled a lot of these videos together from a variety of sources, and really want to, I want to remind you that we're going to be providing you all the links to those moving forward, if that's something that interests you to continue to think about them or rewatch them or share them with your teams, some of them that were particularly meaningful. Those, the ones you just saw were called Diversity, or D&I Drives Innovation, Emerging Trends in Diversity and Inclusion, Cultures That Drive Innovation, Embrace Agility, Diversity and Inclusion, and of course that last one was called Neurodiversity. And we'll include all of those links in kind of a post-conference email you get from us, as well as some articles that we think will facilitate and catalyze your learning from here on out. So hope you're enjoying those. I got some feedback yesterday that having a break was really helpful for people, but having a content-rich break was particularly meaningful for some. So hope you enjoyed those, and thank you to Katrina and Jordan for pulling those together. Okay, what we're going to do is head into breakout rooms. I'm going to type I'm going to try to talk while I type for a moment. I'm going to type the website that you can get the breakout questions. All right, there we go. You also should have gotten that link this morning. It's I just put them on my website for ease of housing that PDF, danieljude.com/govern-wednesday-breakout. I'll also you should have gotten that email, and I'll make sure I'll cruise through the breakout rooms and make sure that that you all have those. I'm going to break into groups about 8. And I would love for you to extend and expand this conversation in ways that are meaningful for you. So where do you want to take the conversation? What are things that didn't get talked about that you want to? What are some things that we touched on, but we didn't really sort of explore at the depth that you wanted to? So I'm going to hit breakout room. It's 10:46. I'm going to pull you back together at about 11:20 or so, 11:25. And we'll share some of our learning together and get ourselves prepped for tomorrow. So let me go ahead and break you out into some rooms.
So Miss Robinson, what's your first name?
Leslie.
Leslie, nice to meet you. You look familiar. Do you know, I don't know. Where are you, which organization are you with?
City of Columbus Department of Public Utilities.
Okay.
Hey, DPU, okay. So this is the first time I've ever been in one of these Zoom breakout rooms. And they said it was supposed to simulate what we would do if we went to a conference, an actual conference down at the city center or wherever it may be. So we technically all got herded into a room. They closed the door. Behind us, we may have cookies, a few muffins, and a few other things that are happening. Water as we drink. So I know that Daniel wanted us to continue the conversation for today, but I'm comfortable saying we can talk about anything that anyone on this call wants to kind of shepherd through. Because one of the things that I was pleasantly surprised with today, and I think that was one of the questions that Daniel asked for us to talk through, was what surprised you about some of the things that Rita and Mike and others shared during this innovation panel? Because coming from corporate America to the city, to working for state and local government, and just so you know, that's my background. I just am overwhelmed with how much can be done, but I just sometimes feel like, my hands are tied. And I don't know, Quincy, or you guys, how you guys are feeling. Liz, what are you thinking?
Well, my name is Quincy Howard. I'm actually with CODA. So I'm here representing CODA and my other organization, the Conference of Minority Transportation Officials. So, okay. Yeah, innovation it plays a lot. When I think of innovation, I'm always thinking about tracking. And in supplier diversity and what have you, and that's kind of what I do for CODA. I'm always tracking, okay, and how to make those numbers. Those numbers can sting, but how to make those numbers palatable to the C-suite and to public sector. So that's kind of where my head was today when I was listening to the innovation piece.
Okay. Well, it makes sense to me, and it is tied to it. That's why I think whoever asked that question around diversity and innovation, and then Mike's comment about working with this office, but more so, having diverse thoughts is essential when you look at innovation and the things that any company or any organization or city entity or department may need. So Doug, what do you think about innovation, and then where does it fit, if at all? Some people are like, it is what it is and can't do a thing about it.
Well, I think one of the main things that was brought up several times was, for me, I'm a younger employee. I work for the City of Columbus Division of Sewers and Drains. I'm at the Southerly Wastewater Treatment Plant, assistant plant manager, and I came up.
Thank you for that. Look, we thank you for that.
Yeah, the toilet paper shortage was not accurate. I'll tell you that right now. No, but I came in as a younger employee, so I've ran into this generational diversity. I've seen where at first, and honestly, I discounted the opinions. A lot of these people that are sitting in the corner being quiet because they've been here for 30 years and they're just ready to punch out for good, And I think there's a lot of ideas sitting out there that we don't access when we just assume that these people have checked out, But the more conversations you get into with them, you start to realize they've had ideas for a long time, but the culture in the areas hasn't been such that they feel like they can comment,
Yeah.
or if they did, they didn't get the feedback they were looking for,
So do you guys feel, and I'm sorry, I'm just going to kind of throw some very selfish questions, that this city feels different with a mayor that's really focused on the equity agenda, and I'm trying to model being the director that's open to listening to her team and her department's ideas, whether it's in our case the PPP loan. So someone just said Quincy, MWBE is revamping our whole outlook process with that. What do you got? I didn't get Miss Robbins. What's your first name?
Liz.
Liz. I'm sorry, you said Liz?
Lindsay.
Not Liz, Robinson down here.
Lindsay,
thank you.
She's in DPU too.
Lindsay and Liz. But I don't care either one of you. What do you think? I don't know. Again, I'm not trying to pick on any departments or any leaders. I'm just looking at, I personally have the experience that this city is a little bit more open than most state and local cities. I see this city seems to be a little bit more progressive. When Mike talked about the smart city and some of the things that we're trying to do, I was like, yeah, that's how I see it. What do you guys think? Lindsay? That's a big question.
Yeah. So I've been at CPU for 7 years, and we've got administrators. And like Doug, I'm on the younger side compared to our and before it was like they're saying that it's open door, but like you don't really comfortable bringing ideas or thinking of new things. It's just roll with how it always has been. And we have some areas we can bring some new ideas, but we are limited in what we can do. And I'm in recruitment and selection.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, like we're tied to civil service, we're tied to the exam.
Now, see, I was looking at some of the innovation with Dayforce coming out, and I know what Director Brandon has been talking about, and I know that Director DeLong, if any of you work for her, she's spot on with here's what we need to do. I mean, she's really focused on ensuring that she responds to customer needs. So I see it as you guys are already on the edge. You're looking towards here's where we need to go, and you've been pretty responsive. But I guess the better question, and Liz, I'm throwing out to anyone, Liz, I just haven't spoken to you. What do you think? I don't know what department you work in, but what do you think? How do you engage your leadership? And how, because again, when she just mentioned HR and civil service, I see them as my partners, and they're trying to find ways to help us move this initiative forward. And maybe I'm biased, but I don't know, Director Brandon and Director DeLong started out with, how do I help you in diversity? That's where I am.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. So one, I'm going to talk a little bit about, Lindsay, what you said earlier about can I come forward with innovation and that sort of thing. And I like the 1, 2, 3 step that was said yesterday. And I think step 1 was find your coalition. So find out who's on your team. So find out who's going to help, when you have those innovative ideas, who's going to help move you forward. And then to help answer that, civil service absolutely loves the equity agenda. We're all about trying to create an environment that allows for diversity. I think a lot of people, and even the mayor yesterday spoke about it, which was frankly quite hurtful for for me to hear that, to portray civil service as, archaic and kind of stuck in our ways. We actually have very innovative leadership with civil service. And I've been with civil service for a very long time, and that's what I've seen throughout my time here. We have innovative solutions where we can, change testing, change the way we're doing things. We may not be able to turn on a dime because we do have federal regulations that we have to follow to ensure that everyone has fair and equal access to jobs, but that's our real purpose. I love Dr. Jana was wonderful yesterday. When they spoke, and I'm trying to use the pronouns that she prefers, so it's that's new for me. But when Dr. Jana spoke, what they said was that, well, I'm kind of going all over the place, but I love the idea of you got to look internal to your staff. You've got to listen to those ideas. With civil service, we have moved forward, with a lot of changes and a lot of the ways we do things. I remember. So then the competency is where it comes in. So when we assess, we're not always assessing for just those competencies that are technical skill sets. Especially with police and fire, we have the most important part of that assessment process is the interpersonal skill sets that we're assessing. Now, because that's the most difficult to assess and also the most difficult piece to evaluate, it costs a lot of money, it's time consuming, all of those things come into play. We don't do that for all of our assessments all the way across the board for the city. So what we do is we put individuals in bands, and then we rely on the department, people like you, Lindsay, to really focus in on those interviews and pull people in and ask about those other competencies that we're not assessing.
So that's how you guys kind of pull in the behavior piece that Dr. Jana was talking about?
Yes.
See, that's what I was going to say, because you've got both components, in my opinion.
Well, we do for our public safety pieces, but not for all of our tests. So some of them are focused on, really those competencies, those skill sets, like for example, office clerk. I mean, what we're really looking at are typing skills. Can you handle Word and Excel and things like that? So those are technical skill sets. But we're counting on the departments to really look at those other skill sets that are necessary. Do you have cultural competency? Do you have good interpersonal? Do you have great motivation? Are you, an idea? All of those pieces, we really count on the departments to do.
And Liz, I got to jump in as a director. I think that is absolutely fair to say that, because I don't think that there is a test out there that can measure behavior or those things that you were referring to. Technical, you guys have got that. But
Yeah.
the behavior piece, I think that it's got to be observed, listened to, articulated, felt when you have that conversation. So you're spot on with that.
Yeah, and
I'd be afraid of a test that says I'm going to measure your behavior.
Well, we actually, so I don't want to say we can't do that, because we do. What I'm saying is they're really expensive. So I would love to invite you in to see some of our, what we call COPE and foam evaluations for our entry-level police and fire, because what we do is we put candidates in situations, they then respond on video, and we score interpersonal skill sets as well as problem-solving skill sets.
You're going to send me a meeting notice, right?
Yeah, well, actually, you just missed it, but for the next one we do, absolutely. We're going to have another one coming up fairly soon, and I'll bring you in on that.
So Doug and Quincy, have you heard any of this? Because to me, and listening to Liz and how they approach it, this is right on the lines of innovation, but also responding to customer requirements. And, again, I don't know what the mayor said yesterday or not. I'm so sorry, may have missed that part. But the one thing that I've experienced is that I'm enlightened and encouraged this way that civil service approaches my outreach for hiring. I see that. The behavior piece, like we were talking about earlier, that's for me to figure out, to see what's a good fit culturally, behavior-wise, relationships with our department, et cetera. What I'm starting to sense just listening to this, and I don't know if Quincy or Doug, if you've heard Liz ever share this, or anyone in Liz's department, because I didn't know you were in civil service, Liz. But anyway, if you guys realize that they're doing these things, I'm wondering whether or not you almost need to have like an infomercial to tell folks this is what civil service is kind of on the cutting edge and doing, and how we're following the legal aspect, but we're also ensuring that we're still allowing candidates the opportunity to do X. And there's some things that are happening on the horizon, and I'm not sure if they are or not, but I suspect that Director DeLong, who has always talked about here's what we're doing different, is probably listening to any feedback that she may be getting and acting upon it. That's my sense, because she listened to me. So again, I'm a little bit biased.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I was looking at Liz and I'm like, I know her from somewhere.
We didn't know who you were, Liz.
But I actually sit on the Columbus Police Department Diversity Council. So we meet quarterly to talk about, the safety, the hiring of police and firemen, hiring minorities in that area. And so we have the different minority groups come together to talk about, what we need or what is needed to attract more minorities to the positions, and then get them through the testing, because there becomes the problem then is getting them through the actual test. It is not a secret that, if your whole family have been in law enforcement or been firemen, then you kind of understand the mindset of going into those positions, and are kind of, your mind is ready, or is has been geared to that being able to attain those positions or get through those tests. But for minorities, it's the complete opposite. We don't trust police department. We don't trust, fire department and all those different things. But now we want to be part of them, and we don't have that mindset. So absolutely that behavioral, we may be able to get through the test, but what trips us up is the, is the behavioral test, or is the, what would you do type things. And it's on both sides, because, it's often wonder, when you hear on the news that someone has been shot by a police officer or what have you, and they, you're like, well, if they didn't, what kind of assessment, mental assessment do these police officers go through before they even become a police officer, or while they haven't been a police officer? I'm sure when they, just call for, unfortunately going off the TV, if they shoot someone, they have to see a counselor. So, maybe that's not true or not, but, it's the same as what's the mental capacity of our officers as they're out in the streets dealing with the public, or and the fire department also.
I was not aware that they tested interpersonal skills of police officers, but that is an important piece of, I shouldn't say, I guess part of the innovation factor is, in the opinion of public sector, is we can't innovate, but here civil service is innovating in trying to work this into the test to somehow assess if these people can talk to other people properly, and that is what has to be out there. Is we are innovating, but you guys aren't being told of it. I work for the city and I didn't know. That's the kind of stuff that we need, and we've talked about it in sewers and drains, because a lot of that we just get pushed off to the side. That's the end of the line. That's where it's at. But then when it came up for us was when we started being considered essential employees throughout this pandemic, and people were like, hey, these people are important, and they're out there doing this for us every day. And that's the same with civil service. They do, like the mayor mentioned yesterday, I heard similar, I don't know if I heard exactly the same as Liz, but that we're behind the times. We're not able to progress in civil service, but we are, and that's not out there for people to know, which is important. Part of the fun, I don't know if that's the proper term, and innovating is getting credit for what you're doing. Like they knew about the charging stations, for the electric cars, but they didn't know that we're testing interpersonal skills of police officers. And most of us didn't, I'm assuming, but that I think that's a critical piece that needs to be added into all of that.
Doug, thank you so much. I really do appreciate those words. You just don't know.
This is not easy stuff. And I know the 5 of us, plus the 2 that aren't speaking, we can't just willy-nilly wave a magic wand and fix anything. So where do we go from here? Because I know what I can impact in my little world over here in ODI. I think you guys have started to see the changes in the way this diversity office is pushing, because I'm trying to think differently as our tagline here in this office. And I look at diversity as the business of diversity. Last year, they said that the US economy could be up by $17 trillion if we were more diverse, hiring more women and minorities in positions. There's so many reasons why we are trying to be more innovative to push it, even our outreach to our MWBEs to help them get PPP loans. I mean, that's where we're headed. But how do we do this in everybody's department? How do we look at resumes to infuse bringing in talent into the city that are blind resumes? Do we have AI? What are you guys thinking? Quincy, Doug, Liz, what are you guys thinking? Because Liz, I know you guys, maybe you're not telling the team, but I know Director Long is already tweaking and looking at certain things. Are you able to share anything that's happening?
Well, you know, it's interesting you say that also. I was sitting in a Zoom meeting yesterday, and we were talking about how white America will hire people who are not fully qualified into positions and let them figure it out, which we don't do. You know, African, minorities have to have all the degrees, all the experience, everything to get the positions that to get that position in that organization. But if you unlike other like white America or any other can pull that person in who has the mindset or has some of the experience and put them in that environment, a diverse candidate, and let them grow and then to their positions like others are allowed to, then there may be an opportunity to create more diversity within those organizations. And that's with government and with private sector. So I really thought that was an interesting conversation that I heard yesterday and really touched me.
Yeah, I think that one thing that I liked about yesterday is call me versus call me out. And I inherently believe, and this is a personal philosophy, that the majority of the world is not racist. I really don't believe that. I believe that there are misunderstandings, there are misinterpretations. I believe there need to be conversations. And there, when was it Jim talked about, I don't even know what to be called. And some people felt uncomfortable with using the word queer, for example. Being of a certain generation, age 65 and older, back then, using that word was a very negative word. Jim said, I don't know if I'm going to be called African-American. No, Jana said it. African-American, Negro, Black. I don't know what to be called. American, African-American. I mean, there were so many words that made people feel as though they couldn't have that conversation unless they tread into something where there'd be some level of punitive reaction. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking about our departments, and Quincy, you just said something about hiring. Liz, and you guys at my HR and my civil service, I'm going to throw this one back to you. Quincy just prompted us with something that you hear about, and I know, you experience often. I know I've known some people that have experienced it. That's why my last company, just so you know, we enacted blind resumes. So we didn't know what your name was, so the person couldn't look at it. And then we also looked at their timeline. So we wanted to avoid age discrimination as well. So we also removed the dates so that, you just looked at people's profiles to look at their competencies than anything else. And then we also had to do one other thing, because I had a global role. I actually had to move the countries, because there was more discrimination for certain countries, whether it was Dubai to India to whatever the case may be. So we literally had blind resumes, and it was XYZ, the person was assigned a number, and there were the competencies. There you go. So that's how we made our decisions. Can't do that here in the city. So you guys, Liz, what do you think?
Well, I think we can do that here in the city. Most of what we get through NeoGov, so that's our application portal system, when civil service, when we look at those minimum competencies, that's absolutely what we're looking at, are those skill sets and how do they match the competencies that were decided that we need in order to get into the position. I think with the city, where the rub is I actually just had a conversation with a cross-functional team with civil service on Monday. And what I learned through that conversation is we do not have very many city jobs that require no experience. Those are very, very minimal. So when we're making, and I say we very loosely, when we're creating those minimum competencies or those minimum qualifications for applicants, we're consulting with the departments, and you're saying what is necessary in order to be able to perform in this job. And we're taking that information and we're creating those minimum qualifications. So, but I think what happens, there's two things that kind of happen. One is a lot of people, when they think about minimum qualifications, they're actually thinking about desirable qualifications. This is what I really want, but it's not truly the minimum of, somebody coming in. So one, we've got to think about that mindset when we're answering those surveys and we're looking at those questions is, what's the true minimum level of competency we need? I think we do need to have more jobs that don't require a particular type of background. So for example, just one of them, security specialist. We have a hard time filling that particular position. Those are all of our security folks that are all over the place. Well, most of them work part-time. And in order to get that job, you already have to be a security specialist. Well, why? Why? I don't understand that. It's not a job that's difficult to train. How long does it take a person to learn, the aspects of what they need to know to do that function, yet will require experience to begin with. So I think that's just one example that I can think of, but I think there's a lot of examples, throughout the city. Others we can, instead of removing them before they even have a chance to show their competency on a test, why don't we lower those minimum qualifications and let them show, yes, I have the typing skills, or I have the ability to work through Word and Excel and all of these other things, to show that, as opposed to shutting them out from even being able to demonstrate those skills.
So Quincy, I'm listening to Liz and I'm making sure as we're in our personal chat, because these are very specific comments. And Liz is a great person, not knowing that she'd end up in this chat box. But she's a great person to kind of address whether it's a misconception or an actuality, whatever it may be, around those issues that you just talked about. What do you think about what Liz shared? And Liz, you might want to clarify any more if Quincy is not sure about, African Americans or people of color having to reach a certain standard versus others that don't. Quincy? You're muted. Okay.
It's kind of,
this is the same thing. Say what we want to say in here. This is our talk. That's the whole purpose of this.
In my years of experience and all my different jobs I've held, I've seen it over and over. People that weren't qualified get put in positions, and they figured it out. They did fine, but that's not at the same level. I don't see that with African Americans, and I'll just say African Americans. That's all I could deal with. But with African Americans or minorities, they have to have all of the degrees and all the experience. So, I like that idea of just, removing the years and removing even the names. I saw on the news the other night, how they were talking about someone, it was overseas, he had to change his name to submit his resume.
Yep.
Yeah. So people would know that he's a certain, comes from a certain culture or what have you. And so removing all of that and just going off the experience, that seems like that, and you always talk about leveling the playing field, but, giving me a fair chance with my skill sets that I have worked on to go into an organization and not looked at, you know, my name or where I got a college degree from or any of that stuff, you know.
So Liz, did
As
you
an
just say
African
that you
American.
guys are doing something like that? Did I miss that part, or were you
Yes.
saying that?
So yes, when we review our minimum competencies, and of course, when we give tests, we're not basing that on names, ethnicity, gender, all of that. That's that's part of what we bring to the table is we even all that out, and we're looking at just those competencies. We're looking at just what you're bringing in. Can you perform on this assessment, those types of things. So all of that is gone. And so when we provide a list to the department, and this is where I say this is really important, we're providing a list, and that's where the interpersonal comes in. So which people are being selected for interviews? So that's where the names, may make a difference. What kind of background are you looking for in terms of those individuals who get selected to be brought into the interview? When they come into the interview, what are you looking for? Are you asking questions about cultural competency? Are you asking questions about, how, I don't know what, I don't know how those selections are made because that's not the role that I play, but I know there's a lot of opportunity there.
So what you can't control is the human intervention once you've done the screening to get to the point of here nine culturally competent folks that we think, who knows what their names are, but they just fit that profile. Then it's up to the department, I guess, is what Quincy and I were just talking about. So Quincy, I'm looking at the human intervention part. Once again, Liz, you guys are getting a bad rap.
I know we do. I know we do.
I mean, I hate to tell you that.
I will love the idea of the infomercial. I wrote that down.
I know, and I'll be glad to play this. Let me know if is Director DeLong and I can act like we're just having a conversation.
Yeah.
And then we're talking through it and just kind of giving people this update. Because just think of these 3 people on this call that have just learned more about what it is that you do.
Right.
How you do it, better said. Because unfortunately, you're being lumped with the whole process.
Right.
Like you were the one that excluded XYZ candidate or hired Joe Blow's brother who can't read or write.
Yeah. So, and I think that's, I think that's part of the difficulty of the job. So I won't say I've worked with the commission for 25 plus years. And in that time, have there been people that have been brought to civil service and say, we want this person hired. We need to find a position for this person. So one, that's absolutely the opposite of what our role is. Our role is to ensure that we're not getting, that we're selecting people that everyone has equal opportunities for these jobs. So that's why we have open competitive, positions. That's why we have open recruitments. That's why we, allow for that competition, so everyone has a chance. So what happens is when they have that individual, and I can't, some of those people have been great and they have wonderful skill sets and all of that sort of thing. Others, maybe not so. How do we handle that? And that's where we get our bad rap, because we couldn't hire the person they wanted because they didn't meet those minimum qualifications. Sometimes that person's diverse, sometimes that person is not. But it's a challenge that it's part of why we get the bad rap though, because that's our whole role, is to stop the nepotism, stop the cronyism, and allow for equal access to jobs. And it's very frustrating for individuals to go through that. And it's not that we don't want to give this person an opportunity. Absolutely, let's give them an opportunity. They may be the most skilled for the position, but let's let them work through that process and show their competencies, show that they have the skill sets, put them in a job that not put them, but allow them access to a job where their skill sets fit. And that's what, so Amy, on on that notion, Amy works a lot with departments on how to work through those
So
dilemmas.
she's helped me a lot. So that's why you just make sure you give her my love.
I will do that.
Because she's absolutely has, come to me and said, here's how, or this is what you want to think about.
Right, right.
Because once someone met the culturally competent, who knows what the small nuance may be. And I think that's what Quincy is saying, that sometimes he thinks that it leans this way versus the other way.
Right.
And how do we ensure that there is a level playing field for the folks that may not have someone whispering in someone's ear to say,
Right.
give
So
them a chance, give them a
yeah.
chance.
So with this leadership right now, with this particular mayor, I mean, the focus is on diversity and equity, but the commission lasts beyond a mayor. So the next mayor could be a mayor that could care less about any of this. And, you know, that mayor just wants to throw in all of his buddies and the people that help that person get elected. And we have, so that's why the commission's really important, that what we stand for and what we do stays intact, because once you knock it down, then where's the protection when you get the, you know, a person in place that doesn't have a good, earnest, you know, reason in terms of the way they're hiring or selecting people for jobs.
So one other thing that Quincy said, and I'm sorry to be picking on the Quincy Liz show, Doug, and you guys just jump in, but I think it's educational for us, and hopefully we can be like the bees and pollinate others to help them at least see this part of it as well. Because I believe, I watch Fox News, I watch regular news. I mean, that's just how I try to look at life. So as I think about this, Quincy, you said something that's interesting about the requirements. So Liz, can you tell us how are those requirements built? Because inherently there's been this big conversation about systemic racism, and the misnomer is, are those things built to ensure that there isn't an equal playing field? Talk to us, give us the reality.
So the reality is, no, they're not built to give an unequal playing field.
They were built a long time ago, you know, you never know.
Yeah, and I think that legacy unfortunately sticks with us, but I do think there is opportunity for biases that we don't recognize when we're making, when we're creating those processes or those selection criteria. And that's what we've got to take a deeper look at. That's also where we need to really, all of those who are involved in filling out job questionnaires, filling out, you know, talking with our civil service folks when they're coming through and they're doing an update for a classification, and really try to get past the what's the minimum qualification. Don't tell me the desirable qualifications, tell me the minimum qualifications, because I think that's one of the biggest things that could be, I don't know for sure, but could be causing a problem in terms of biases that get introduced that we don't recognize.
We're back in the main room, everyone. So sorry for the abrupt shift for some of your groups. I know you're midstream in your conversation, and that's not ideal, but I wanted to honor our hard stop for the day. So I hope you had a great conversation in your breakout, and I hope I hope you were able to put some legs on the whole conversation of innovation and measuring process and product, or where's the starting place, or what are some of the ingredients I'm looking for, and all the different things that and all the places you probably took that conversation. I was able to join a group and have good conversations. One of the things one of our group members brought up was, we didn't even talk about the idea of timing, that the best idea at the wrong time might not get the momentum it needs, or the buy-in it needs, or it might just mean, the right idea at the wrong time is the wrong idea. And there's an element of timing. And so she was talking about this idea of the parking lot. They have a whiteboard in their office where if you have a great idea and someone says, hey, there's a constraint that we're going to honor, maybe it's financial, maybe it's time, maybe it's whatever, put your idea in the parking lot. We see you, we hear you, we value that idea. Park it for a minute. Park it for a month, for a season, because we want to come back to it. That's a great strategy. And I'm sure you talked about lots more in your groups too. I wanted to recap very quickly our day as we before we exit out of this space. Things I'm thinking about when I think about what is innovation, and am I being innovative in terms of the way I approach challenges that I'm faced with in the spaces that I deal with. So here's what I'm walking away with in terms of kind of the components of a recipe, just for me to think through, what does this look like for me? I'm thinking about, am I exercising empathy? Am I engaging with the people that I'm thinking about? Is it authentic engagement, or am I assuming I know something about them when I might not really? Am I gathering a team? And while I'm doing that, minimizing this equation or conflation of experience with vision, right? I don't want to do that. Reframing cost or just resource allocation as investment, whether it's money or time, right? reframing failure as piloting and experimenting. And maybe it's a semantic shift. For a lot of us, words matter. Words have power, and they shape the way we believe the world works. So reframing those words, embracing constraints, like Paul talked about, and maybe reimagining them when necessary. But those constraints really help push and pull and squeeze those best ideas out of us. Measuring the environment, the process, and the product around my ideas. And now, based on my last small group, they just added for me thinking about timing. The right idea at the wrong time, you're not going to get the mesh of gears that you really want. So those are some of the things I'm thinking about as I walk away from this morning's session. Remember, we're going to be sharing resources and recordings with you. We're recording all of these sessions. You'll get the recordings of the panel conversations and so forth. Not your small group breakout conversations, but the large full group conversations. We'll get you those recordings, as well as links to all the resources, articles, videos, and so forth that get referenced during this conference. So you'll get access to all of that good stuff. I want to thank our speakers, Paul and Rita and Mike. Thank you so much for lending us your expertise and your experience. I just want to acknowledge it's a big ask as a conference organizer when I come and ask somebody, hey, will you give us hours of your time to do something and just share what you're good at with people who want to be better at it? That's a big ask, just to be honest. And folks we asked for today's panel responded enthusiastically, and I'm so grateful they did. What a great conversation. So thank you to them. Thank you to the Office of Ohio, or City of Columbus Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and that team for helping me run today and plan all the stuff we're talking about. Remember, tomorrow we'll get started at 8:30 again. That same link is live as always. You'll get it again in your email first thing in the morning, about 7:30 probably. Click that link and join in. Tomorrow's sort of facet of the conversation, we're thinking about impact, taking these conversations about inclusion and innovation and sort of turning the table. And what's the result? What's the impact? And we're thinking about it specifically through the lens of transformational change rather than transactional change. And we're going to have a panel of chief diversity officers from the private and the public sector. Our own chief diversity officer here in Columbus, Director Beverly Stallings Johnson, the chief diversity officer, Marcus Miller for the city of Chicago. We've got chief diversity officers from the private sector, all really thinking about how we create transformational change in spaces that we've been given permission to be innovative and inclusive within. So I hope you'll join us for that. I'll make sure we email you all the necessary information to get you onto that. And other than that, have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon. Go be innovative. Thank you for being with us on day 2. See you at 8:30 tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.